You now have the floor. It is live and recording. You're all set, sir. The meeting's yours.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. It is now 6:31. I would like to have a determination of quorum. I'll do that in a roll call. Mr. Mattson. Mr. Mattson.
Here.
Mr. Ozenkowski.
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Polselli.
Here.
Mr. Reyes.
Here.
Mr. Kenny.
Here.
Secretary Lukowitz.
Here.
Vice Chair Kalunian.
Here.
And Chairman Flynn is here. Okay, if we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Dag has our flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
Of
of the United States of America,
and to
to the republic for which it stands,
One
one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
All right, thank you. I just want to ask the board, I'd like to move a little bit around on the agenda. I'm gonna ask for a motion to move 10.1, 10.2A, and 10.2B will be before the number 9 public hearing on the solar. Could I get a motion for that, please?
Motion to move.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mattson. Did I get a second?
I second.
Second by who?
I
James.
second.
Second by Ms. Lukowitz. All those in favor, Mr. Mattson?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Ozenkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Polselli?
Aye.
Mr. Reyes?
Aye.
Mr. Kenny?
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Kalunian?
Aye.
And Chairman Flynn also says aye. Okay, first on the agenda is 4.1, approval of minutes, August 26, 2020. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve, Carl.
Okay, do I get a second?
Second to approve. James.
Second by Mr. Kinney. Any discussion on the minutes?
Oh, okay.
Okay, hearing none. Mr. Mattson?
Aye.
Mr. Ozenkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Polselli?
Aye.
Mr. Reyes?
Aye.
Mr. Kinney?
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Kalunian?
Aye.
And Mr. Flynn also says aye. Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Okay, number 5.1, we have Riverview Nursing Home, Inc., and Ryan Finance Ltd. Applicant is requesting a one-year extension for an approval of a development plan of review and special use permit recommendation for a parking lot expansion, AP 104 lots 81, 82, 83. It's zoned R20 and the address is 546 Main Street. Is anybody here for the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Attorney Wyatt Brochu for the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Wyatt.
The applicant is requesting a one-year extension. As you know, it is a nursing facility. It was quite distracted the past few months due to the COVID pandemic and addressing that with our residents and families. So the project has been delayed. We'd ask for a one-year extension. We still have intent to expand the parking as was brought before this board in that plan.
Okay. Any discussion by the board before I ask for a motion for an extension? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask a motion for an extension on the Riverview Nursing Home, 1 year.
Motion to extend it.
Motion to extend by Mr. Kenny. Do I hear a
I
second?
second.
Second by Ms. Lukowitz. I'll do a roll call, please. Mr. Mattson,
Aye.
Mr. Ozakowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Porcelli,
Aye.
Mr. Reyes,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Clunian,
Aye.
Chairman Flynn also says aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, number 6, does staff want to say anything, or do I just say that's continued?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the next item on the agenda was the Green Farm Estates. They were going to be on for a bond setting. They're just finalizing some last-minute numbers. So I'd ask if the chair could just kick this over to our next meeting on October 28th, please.
Okay, so we'll continue this meeting for our next meeting on October 28th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. So number 7, we have a recommendation to town council. Recommendation to town council for a final bond release, Falls at Scott Hollow. It's a final bond release with interest in the amount of $93,834.89 for a 19-lot major residential cluster compound subdivision, AP 322, Lot 84, Zone RR3, 754 Victory Highway. Is anybody here representing the applicant?
Mr. Flynn, it doesn't look like the applicant is here. Mr. D'Agostino, the applicant is not here. This is, I have a memo from the town engineer. He has finished his final site walk. He's drafted a letter to me allowing release of the final $93,000. This is the last bond. The project has been done for quite a while now. The applicant isn't here. I don't know if we could proceed without the applicant here, or I'll defer to the solicitor on this one.
Well, quite frankly, the applicant ought to be here. It's their request. However, given what you've represented and given the information in the file, I think it's safe to say that this project being long outstanding, I feel comfortable with the board taking action. But, it's the board is here to serve the applicants, and it's a shame that the applicant isn't here.
I understand. Yeah, and I have also spoken with the town finance director, to get the final amount of monies in there. This is the Falls at Scott Hollow. I don't know if some members are familiar. This subdivision has been done for quite a while now. They just finished up some last-minute punch list items they had. They had to get rid of some debris that they had left on one of the vacant lots. So, it's been pretty much done for a while. I mean, I've spoken with the town manager. I'd like this to go before the council on Monday evening. So if the board sees fit, per Attorney D'Agostino's recommendation, I'd appreciate it if we could, get a recommendation to the town council so they could appear on Monday evening.
Okay, before, anybody on the board have a question before I ask for a motion?
I did. Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman,
Mr. Colonian.
will the applicant be at the town council meeting on Monday?
I would hope so, because I don't imagine that the town council will be as forgiving.
Thank you.
Is that true, Mr. Wazika?
Mr. Crossman, if he is not there, then I will table this.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
Okay, anybody else from the board have any issues with this before I ask for a motion? All right, hearing none. Could I get a motion for a recommendation for the bond release for Falls at Scott Hollow?
Recommendation to release the bond per
Okay.
the letter received to Mr. Crossman.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Kenny. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second by Mr. Pacelli, and I'll go through a roll call. Mr. Mattson,
Aye.
Mr. Ozakowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Pacelli,
Aye.
Mr. Reyes,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Colonian,
Aye.
Chairman Flynn also says aye. Okay, that was a recommendation to town council. Number 8 is a recommendation to the zoning board of review. It's for a special use permit for the town hall annex owner, Town of Coventry, applicant, Columbus Energies, Inc., proposed liquid propane dispensing station in the rear of the northeast parking lot, AP 59, Lot 13R, Industrial 1, and the address is 1675 Flat River Road. Anybody here representing the applicant?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. Michael Levinson for the applicant, Columbus Energies, Inc. I'm an attorney with offices at 1543 Fall River Avenue in Seekonk, Massachusetts. Come before you tonight for a special permit. There is in the attendees list on the Zoom meeting, I do have one of my clients here as well, if there's any questions the board has regarding the operations or the actual, what they intend to do with the property out there. As you can see from the memo and the application we've submitted, we're seeking to have a special permit to allow us to put a propane tank on the property. This property is being currently used to store buses. I believe it's Ocean State Transit is the tenant out there. Those buses are actually propane. They don't operate on basic motor fuel. They operate on propane. And there's fuel them up. There's constant trips back and forth, which unfortunately adds a cost to the taxpayers. By allowing the special permit to be granted, we'd allow the propane tank would be on site, which would result in less trips and fortunately a cheaper cost for the taxpayers here in town.
Okay, any questions from the board?
I have a couple of questions. What are the hours of operation?
If he's, as I said, there is a gentleman in the waiting room who's actually here on behalf. He's my client. I'd like to see if there's a way we can get him into this. Hold on, I can tell you who it is. It's okay. Yeah, he's raising his hand right now. His name's Jay Macedonio. Is there a way to have him be able to talk into this meeting?
Yeah, no, I got him allowed to talk.
Okay.
That should bring him in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is he in?
Yeah, Jay, you there?
Jay, you have to unmute.
Jay, you got to unmute.
Yep. Guys got me?
Yeah.
You're in.
There you go.
Thank you for the assistance, board. I appreciate it. Jay, there was a question raised about the hours of operation when you tend to be using the station out there.
Our hours of operation, 8 o'clock till 5 o'clock at night. We try to get to the bus yard when they're all there at once, which tends to be about between the hours of 9 and 12. I think they leave at 12 to go their second runs. So that's usually the, but once we have this tank there, we're not committed to being there when all the buses are there. So to answer that question, yeah, between the hours of 8 and 4, realistically.
Will somebody be on site all day?
Yes, Ocean State's going to have their own fillers, certified and trained to tend to the buses. So they'll, they can tend to their own filling needs. And the pump station itself is relatively silent, doesn't make much noise at all. And the buses can fill up as they come in between routes and stuff. I don't think they'll make any special trips for it. And we'll just fill once a week or once every 5 days, whatever the tank needs for fuel.
Okay. Now it's all fenced in?
Yes, there'll be like a 6-foot fence all around it, around the crash protection, little bollards so that, nothing can bump into this stuff.
Okay, and your company is going to hold the keys?
Yes, they'll have the keys inside. We have the keys in the truck too, just to make sure. There'll be two gates to get in and out of, 2 forms of egress. And yes, we'll have our own set of keys too.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure, thank you.
Anybody else from the board have any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Colonian.
Unmute.
Rick,
there you
here
go.
we go. Takes me a second. So your testimony is that the hours of operation don't start until 8 a.m., but yet Ocean State Transit has fillers on site. So they're not going to be filling the buses before 8 a.m.?
You won't see our trucks there before even realistically 9 o'clock in the morning by the time they came to on site with our delivery truck. The buses, if they start in the morning, I think they start relatively early. First bus is probably there 5:30, 6 in the morning or something like that. I don't know what their hours of operation, if they'll start with a bus empty and try to fill it in the morning, or if they'll just fill them, keep them full at night and keep it light in the morning. I don't know what their intent would be on the filling of on their schedule.
And I do have the item on the agenda as a filling station, and I noted the attorney referred to it as a propane tank. So this is more than just a propane tank on site that's being filled. They're actually operating a filling and dispensing station for all of the buses for the entire town of Coventry.
I believe there's like
And I think,
32,
again,
32 of them maybe.
just, you know, I know we did a spot zone change to industrial, but I'm still not overly enthused about having a propane filling station abutting a residential two-family dwelling next door. I don't think it's compatible. I have one more question, and I please don't take it the wrong way. Mr. Levinson, you said your office was in Seacon, Massachusetts. Can I assume you are licensed to practice in Rhode Island? Is that correct?
Yes, I am licensed, Mr. Clunian, yes.
Just checking. Okay, that's all I have.
Anybody else from the board have any
Yes.
questions? Mr. Kenny, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. I'm looking through the documents. Has this been run by the fire department?
Thank you.
What is their take or, response to this?
Yes, I've contacted all your departments in town, and to no real comeback. Nobody's returned a call with concern. I don't know if they really weren't concerned until either it came to a zoning, came to fruition on your end. But they're relatively cookie cutter. I have five others in the state, and they're on a skidded assembly. They fall under the 4,000 gallon mark. They're actually only the size of what the delivery truck is that's bringing the fuel there twice a week now. So, it would just be, that 3,400 gallon tank on site. And like I said, no bigger than a regular delivery truck there. So it's nothing overwhelming.
Yeah, and just to buttress that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, as we put forth in our memo that was submitted with our application, we intend to make sure that we're following all the Coventry Fire Department and the Rhode Island State Fire Marshal, all the regulations regarding, the storage and operation of this facility.
Okay, I would have just liked to seen something that came back from the fire marshal, but if they've been non-responsive, I'm sure when it gets to zoning, if it gets to zoning, they'll look into it a little further as well.
And I will follow through with that too, to make sure.
Thank you,
On
Joe.
the same page.
Anybody else from the board?
Yes. Yes,
Go
I
ahead,
do.
Mr. Reyes.
Yeah, this is similar to what every DOT has right now in a gas pump station. This is just, a separate thing, right? They're gonna go and fill up and take off, just like the DOTs do around the state.
Yes.
Okay, yep.
And by the way, the town of Coventry has one right across the street. It's not propane, but it's gasoline and diesel. We have
Yes.
one right across the street.
Yeah, and if I may, one more time, Mr. Chairman, these are actually fairly common in other communities throughout Rhode Island. Jay, if you want to discuss, I believe you guys have had these permitted and approved in other towns and cities, correct?
Oh, yeah, so I guess the closest one to Coventry might be Exeter. And then from there, East Greenwich, South Kingston also runs a big fleet on propane, and East Providence runs the biggest propane fleet. And they've been on board for like 6 years, relatively seamless, and they love it, so.
And just to clarify, you said that would probably be once a week filling the buses?
I think so, but by the size of your fleet, yeah, once a 40 weeks of the year, yeah, while school runs. Yeah.
And we do have a sizable propane tank at the school off around the residential area, and that has to be filled by a truck. So, I mean, filling a bus or filling a tank, to me, if it's zoned and it's in the proper use, I don't have an issue with it. Anybody else from the board? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a motion for a recommendation for a special use permit.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Reyes.
I'll make the motion for the special use permit for the town of Coventry on hall, annex town hall, for the propane tank.
Okay, I had a motion. Do I get a second?
I second.
Okay, I have a second by Ms. Lukowitz. Okay, I'll do a roll call. Mr. Mattson?
Aye.
Mr. Ozenkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Pacelli?
Aye.
Mr. Reyes?
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Clunian.
Yay.
No, we have one nay, and Mr. Chairman, Chairman Flynn is aye, so
Hey, you skipped me, Ron.
Yep, the recommendation passes.
Ron, you skipped me.
Oh, I'm sorry. How can I do that?
Ah, well.
Mr.
Hey,
Flynn.
the only thing I would like to add is if he would amend his motion to include the planning director's report.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't ask for discussion. Okay, would you like to amend your motion, Mr. Reyes, to include the director's report?
Sure, yes.
And can I get an amend on the second? Can I get an amendment on the second?
That would be you, Sandy.
Yes, yeah, sorry. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kinney, are you a yes?
Yes, I am. Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We have one nay and all the rest yeses.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is a recommendation to zoning. It's 8.2 for special use permit. Cookson, owner, James T. Cookson, applicant is the same. It's a proposed addition to a non-conforming residential structure, thereby increasing the non-conformity. Current garage is 26 by 22. Proposed garage addition is 31.3 by 22 for a total new size of 57.3 by 22. That's AP 80, lot 67. It's a zone R20 and it's 164 Harris Avenue. Anybody here representing the applicant?
I am here. I am the applicant.
Hi, Mr. Cookson.
Hello.
Can you
Mr.
just tell
Chairman.
the board what basically you're trying to do there?
Yes, the current non-conforming structure is it's a detached and it's recessed from the actual home. It's detached and recessed back from the home. So I'm requesting permission to construct an addition. There you go. I'm requesting permission to construct an addition to that existing structure. The addition will actually be attached to the current structure in the front where you see the garage doors, right where the cursor is. And it's going to bring the structure forward, ultimately aligning the completed structure on the same plane as the home, so that when viewed from the street, the home and the garage will be on one continuous line across the property. The relief that I'm seeking is as Mr. Chairman mentioned, is the current setback requirements in effect on my property of 20 feet from the property line for structures. The existing structure is located 10 feet from the property line, and the proposed addition will also be located the same exact 10 feet for its entirety.
Okay. Anybody from the board have any questions for Mr. Cookson? Anybody have any questions for Mr. Cookson? Russell, can you take that picture down? Thank you. Okay, if I entertain a motion for a recommendation for.
God bless you.
God bless you. Do I hear a motion?
Chairman, I'll make a motion. Favorable recommendation, AP at 164 Harris Avenue, AP 80, lot 67, zone R20 residential, to expand an existing non-conforming structure with a dimensional variance from the side yard setbacks. The expansion would involve the construction of a 31 by 3 inch by 22 addition to an existing garage. The property has a permanent physical address. It has sufficient off-street parking. Utilities are pre-existing. The abutting properties and surrounding neighborhood is primarily single-family residential. The proposal is consistent with the Coventry Comprehensive Plan and the granting of the special use permit and dimensional variance will not affect the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. I would also like to include the planning director's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenny. Do I have a motion? Then I get a second.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Reyes. Any discussion? Hearing none. I'll take a roll call. Mr. Mattson,
Aye.
Mr. Ozakowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Porcelli, Mr. Porcelli,
Unmute.
Aye.
Mr. Reyes,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Clunian,
Aye.
and Chairman Flynn also says aye. The recommendation is approved to zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board. I appreciate it. I have one
You're welcome.
question
Good
of
luck.
my own. Do I have to stay for this whole meeting?
You're all set, sir. You can go.
Oh, okay, thank you
Only if
very
you
much,
like to.
folks. I enjoyed this, I enjoyed this little
welcome.
taste of town government. Thank you very much.
Thank
Just
you.
go click leave in your lower right-hand corner.
Okay, thank you again. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman and board. Thank you again. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, 8.3, I have a recommendation to zoning board of review for special use permit for Wings Lake House Tavern. Owner, Haramus Realty LLC, applicant Julie E. Austin, Austin Enterprises LLC, per Article 6, zoning district use and dimensional regulations, table 6-1, E7.02, tavern, cafe, club, bar, or lounge, alcoholic beverage requires a special use permit. This is AP 65 Lot 11, Zone VRC, and the address is 2260 Flat River Road. Anybody here for the applicant? Staff, do I have anybody here for this applicant?
You have two people here, they're just not speaking.
Oh, okay.
She started.
Okay, go ahead.
This was Juliet Austin. I was going to say Attorney McNeils is here representing me.
Okay. So Attorney McNeils, is it?
Wait a minute, Attorney McNeils is outside. I gotta bring him in again. Something happened.
Okay, no problem.
Attorney McNeils, can you hear us now?
I can hear you the entire time.
Okay, you're in now. I brought you in as a participant.
Excellent. So my name is Ryan McNeilis. I am the attorney for Austin Enterprises. They have an application for a special use permit. My understanding is this location has had a restaurant before, and they need to have this approved in order they can operate a similar restaurant. There's going to be a lunch and dinner restaurant operating from 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. There will be pizza and chicken wings there. They will focus mostly on takeout, but they will have some dine-in. And we do have Juliet Austin who can answer the board's questions.
Okay, does anybody from the board have any questions for the applicant?
Yes. Is there going to be any live music at any time?
Yes, we do have plans on having live music. We are looking at only solo entertainment. We are not looking at any large bands or anything like that. We're looking for mainly acoustic and any kind of like karaoke.
And the hours for that will be till 1 in the morning?
No, that would be done by 11 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Clooney, and I saw your hand up.
Nope, I'm all set. Sandy asked the question.
Anybody else from the board have any questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for recommendation to the zoning board for the special use permit for Wings Lake House Tavern. I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair, Glenn Anderson.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Make a favorable recommendation for a special use permit. Armin's Realty LLC for Juliet Austin Enterprises, 2260 Flat River Road, AP 65, Lot 11. zone VRC. I make this motion based on the finding of facts that the facility will provide safe ingress and egress of vehicles. The property has sufficient off-street parking for all the uses within that strip mall. The appropriate utilities are available adjacent to the proposed site. The proposed use is compatible with other uses in the VRC zoning district. The proposed facility will comply with Article 7 standards, providing that the project receives approval from the fire marshal and meets all the requirements and standards set forth in the state building code. The proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. This project really will have no should have no detrimental impacts on public health, safety, wellness, where welfare and morals upon issuance of the special use permits. I'd like to also incorporate the director's report in my motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I second.
I'll take second by Carl Mattson. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call. Mr. Mattson?
Aye.
Mr. Ozakowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Porcelli?
Aye.
Mr. Reyes?
Aye.
Mr. Kenny?
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz?
Aye.
Mr. Colonian?
Aye.
Chairman Flynn also says aye. So the special use permit to zoning is granted through to zoning.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Thank
you all
you.
very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, as stated at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to skip by number 9.1 and go to 10.1. It's a pre-application scheduling a site walk for Fairview Avenue subdivision. Owners Joseph LaCroix, 61 Wood Cove Drive, Coventry, Rhode Island. Applicant same. Proposed 2-lot minor subdivision of a vacant lot. AP 80 Lot 15 R20. And its address is 0 Fairview Avenue. Anybody here for the applicant?
Mr. Flynn, Thomas Cronin.
Hi, Tom. If you want to do a quick, very brief PowerPoint, and then we're going to schedule a site walk.
Sure. So AP 80 Lot 15 is in an R20 zone. It's currently vacant land. The proposal is a 2-lot minor subdivision without street creation. It's to create 2 residential lots. There's currently 1.23 acres of land on the corner of Fairview Avenue and Ray Street. Both lots will have access to a public street, public water, and have a private septic OWTS. Both lots conform to zoning with no variances sought. There is a substantial utility easement on the southern end of the project. To the left, as you look at the shared screen, that easement will be left in place and no construction will take place on that easement. We'd like the board's initial reaction and to schedule a site walk for this project. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cronin, does anybody from the board have any questions before we schedule the site walk?
Ron, I
remove
do.
that, Matt?
Jay. Oops. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jake.
Mr. Cronin, based on the plan, can you just clarify for me, do you have frontage on Fairview Ave or is it only on Ray Street?
The frontage is on Fairview Ave as well. These lots were, this one lot was originally part of the subdivision down the street that goes around that horseshoe there. And this was the far edge of that subdivision. There is a frontage on Fairview.
Okay, just, I couldn't tell if that was a right of way or if that property line was owned by Norette and Edward along that, along Fairview Ave.
The survey indicates it's just an irregular property line, and the Narragansett Electric easement goes right to this, from the street back to this property.
Okay.
Anybody else with any questions from the board? Are you all set, Jay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, hearing none. Ms. Lukowitz, would you like to schedule a site walk?
Yep, the site walk, October 10th at 9 in the morning. The rain date, October 17th at 9 in the morning.
Might be beneficial if we agree maybe to park on Ray Street.
That sounds good, Mr. Cronin.
Okay. I thank the board, and I'll see you then.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
All right, next we have 10.2 and 10.2A and B. I'm going to be recusing myself from this, and I'll be back on for 9.1. Mr. Clooney, if you could take over, please.
I will. How should we notify you when we're all done? I'll have Russ text you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Flynn, Mr. Colonian, before you start, I'm waiting for Mr. Flynn to leave. Mr. Flynn, lower left-hand corner, stop video. I think he logged off. Mr. Colonian.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Couple things with this one here. If you notice in the agenda, when the agenda was sent out, there's a 10A and a 10B. The 10B says special use permit. Is that correct?
It does.
There will be no 10B here this evening. They're not asking for a special use permit. There was a miscommunication. What they're asking for is a dimensional variance, not a special use permit. So 10B will not be heard this evening. You will just be hearing 10A. The second thing I wanted to just expound upon, and by the way, I've spoken with Solicitor D'Agostino about this today, and we're all in agreement. On 10A, I had made reference to the board making a recommendation to the town council on that dimensional variance. I'm sorry, to the zoning board of review, I apologize, not the town council. The planning commission does not have to make a recommendation on a dimensional variance. They only make recommendations on special use permits. So your role here this evening strictly is, if the board so chooses to approve this subdivision, they would have to approve it with the stipulation that they appear before the zoning board obtaining any dimensional variances they need. I just wanted to set the record straight before Attorney Cronin begins. Attorney Cronin, are you in agreement with everything I've said?
Yes, Mr. Crossman.
All right. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Colonian.
Thank you for the explanation. I would also, if I could then just step back. So the matter before us tonight is to give a preliminary plan approval for the proposed 2-lot minor subdivision with one existing single-family residence. Before we get started, and I know Mr. Cronin is here for the applicant, for further clarification, are you saying there is no recommendation required at all to the zoning board, even for the dimensional variance? Because we don't make those recommendations. Those are out of our control. We only do special use permits.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, and then originally when we went on the site walk, the plan that was proposed had, the new lot had 90 feet of frontage. That's now changed to 86.
Yes.
Does that?
You could explain it, or I'll let Attorney Cronin explain it. It's his application.
Okay. Then Mr. Cronin proceed. But I think what would be beneficial to the board is we had quite a lengthy discussion, I believe, about why 90 feet of frontage allowed this to proceed administratively.
All right.
I believe now it has
Mr. Cronin, you weren't involved back then. Would you like me to answer this question for Mr. Colonian?
Sure, Mr. Crossman.
Okay. Mr. Colonian, if I may. The applicant was originally looking for the chairman. He had petitioned to grant an administrative variance. Okay? An administrative variance can be granted up to a maximum of 25%, which was 90 feet was 25% of the 120 needed in the R20 zone. As such, when this whole process took place, abutters had to be notified. If I received any official letters from the abutters expressing their problems with this application, I could not approve this application administratively, and it had to appear before the board. I was in receipt of 2 letters from 2 of the abutters who wanted to see this petition go before the board, so therefore, I could not do the administrative variance, okay? So now that the administrative variance was off the table, the 90 feet is what controlled the admin variance, because I could not grant an admin variance for anything more than 90, for the 90 feet was my threshold.
Yep.
Now, I guess, since the applicant is going to the zoning board, he's asking for that additional 4 feet. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cronin, because now he comes into play. I'm just giving you a background.
Well, I just had one follow-up to that, Mr. Crossman, and that is I could have sworn when we went on the site walk, the 90 feet was set at a point that avoided the existing driveway. Was it a result of a survey? Did we recalculate and find out, or did he actually shift it 4 feet?
Sir, I was not on that site walk. I'm going to defer to Mark Boyer, who I believe was on that site walk. I'm sure he could answer all your questions at this point.
Okay, if you want to let Mr. Cronin proceed, I'll just save that question till later. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Boyer, if it's okay with you, I'll make the initial presentation and we can address the question of the 4 feet at the end. Is that okay with you?
That's fine with me.
Okay, great. So, Thomas Cronin, Nolan Bernero, Cronin Farrar, 1070 Main Street, Coventry, Rhode Island. For the applicant, Ronald and Lisa Flynn, no pressure. The printer plat is 21 Calvintown Road, AP 60, lot 64. It's in an R20 zone. The existing use is a 1 1/3 acre lot, a single-family residential use in a residential neighborhood. This is a primary residential neighborhood. We're suggesting a minor subdivision without street creation. The proposal is to create 2 separate residential lots. There's no wetlands identified on the site. Parcel 1 would consist of the existing home on the southern portion of the existing lot. That lot, parcel 1, would be 31,971 square feet, and it would conform to zoning, all setbacks and other requirements in its entirety. Parcel 2 would be the new residential lot on the northern end of the property, 26,850 square feet. It conforms to zoning requirements for the R20 zone in all ways except for the frontage, which we've already been discussing. The frontage required is 120 feet of frontage along Calvintown Road. We are proposing 86 and seeking 34 feet of relief. This lot could be conformed so that, configured so it conformed with zoning, could be tortured so that it fits the proposed zoning, but the property line would be contorted and interfere with the current driveway of the existing residence. The Town of Coventry Comprehensive Plan and Zoning and Planning boards, staff, and regulations have expressed strong encouragement to parties to have straight and predictable boundary lines between lots. Right? That's a goal. That's an aspiration of this planning process. So we've attempted to provide a straight and predictable boundary between these 2 lots, but as a result, we're going to need some relief from zoning. As you can see from the shared screen here, the lot itself, it's just an oddly shaped lot, 300 approximately feet on the northern end or the wide end, and only 84 feet on the narrow end near the intersection with Alvaro Road. So we're here to request preliminary plan approval. Any approval, as mentioned by Mr. Crossman and Mr. Clooney in the opening, would be conditional on the zoning board providing relief or granting a variance for relief of 34 feet of frontage. We have fire and water approvals. We need to get OWTS approval and the usual sediment control approvals from the town engineer. So those would be items for final. We would request final administratively. I'm going to have Mr. Boyer explain the change to the frontage now so that we can address any questions about that. Mr. Boyer, are you there? Can you hear us?
I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay. Would you briefly explain to the board the change from the 90 feet originally proposed on the plan to the current 86 feet?
Sure. I don't have, so there have been 3 renditions of this plan. One was the pre-app. Then we prepared an administrative variance plan that accompanied the administrative variance request. And then we prepared the preliminary subdivision. So I'm going by memory, but I believe that the first 2 plans always showed that a small portion of the driveway would be encompassed by the new lot, would fall within the boundaries. I believe it was about 3 feet. And I think totally it was about 6 or 8 square feet is all that would have taken up. And I spoke with the applicants, and if the board had, or if the administrative officer had granted the administrative variance, then we would have created an easement for that portion of the driveway, even though it's really not usable by any kind of vehicle. Once the administrative variance was thrown out, the thought process was to avoid the need for an easement over that portion of the driveway. I brought that property corner back so that it would encompass no part of that driveway, and then created the line to meet the minimum standards, minimum setbacks of the existing house. That is the only change that we really made on the plan. And again, it was simply because, well, the reason was to eliminate the need for an easement, which would have been about, again, 6 to 8 square feet.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Mr. Clooney, does that address your question,
Yes.
or do you have any follow-up on that topic?
No, it appears. I could have been mistaken. It's very possible that the initial plan showed that small 3 or 4 square linear feet into the driveway, and I just didn't realize it. So that's fine. Doesn't make a difference anyway at this point. Thank you. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Mr. Cronin? Oh, were you finished, Mr. Cronin, with your presentation?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for you? Okay. Well, hearing none, I just want to clarify. So the matter before us is we'll be looking for a motion regarding the request for preliminary approval. There are still 2 outstanding items, if I understood Mr. Cronin correctly. That's the soil. I'm sorry. Soil erosion plan and the approval of an on-site wastewater treatment system. And he's also asked that from this point forward, it's going to be subject to appearing before the zoning board. And from this point forward, I believe his request is that it then can proceed to final approval administratively. Does anyone on the board wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Colonian. I recommend a favorable motion. Address Ronald P. and Lisa M. Flynn, 21 Colvintown Road, AP 60, Lot 64, zoned R20, lot size 1.33 acres. The applicant's proposing to subdivide the existing lot into 2 parcels. The minor subdivision will require a dimensional variance from zoning, which will result in the creation of a 31,371 square foot lot and a 26,878 square foot lot. Let's see, what do we got here? Neither parcel has enough land to be subdivided again. The adequacy of the street on the proposed lot's frontage, the criteria has been met. Adequacy of access from the lots onto the street, the proposed lot meets the criteria. There's no scenic issues. Upon issuance of the requested dimensional variance from zoning, parcel 2 will conform. Lot 2, the minor subdivision, is generally consistent with the town of Coventry's comprehensive plan. The proposed residential development is in keeping with the adjacent uses. Lots have direct frontage on Coventry Road. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan and supports the rural development of the R20 zone. The proposed subdivision shall be required to receive permits from RIDEM and approved OWTS and the town engineer for soil erosion and sedimentation control permit. Strict adherence to the guidance set forth in these permits should ensure that there will be no negative impacts to the environment. Upon receipt of, it's gonna comply with zoning upon receipt from the variance from the zoning board. The amount of traffic generated from the single-family house lot should be negligible. Preliminary plan, the applicant should consider a driveway design that would allow the homeowner to turn around on the subject parcel and not back out onto Coventry Road. The applicant shall receive an OWTS permit from RIDEM prior to issuance of the building permit. Applicants shall receive an approved soil erosion and sedimentation control plan from the town of Coventry engineer prior to issuing the building permit. The applicant shall be required to install underground dry wells for rooftop runoff, and the applicant appear before and receive the approved dimensional variance for frontage of parcel 2 before the zoning board. I also want to incorporate the planning director's report into my motion.
And before I ask for a second, Mr. Kenny, was it your part of your motion to allow the applicant to proceed to final plan approval administratively?
I would like to amend my motion to approve for the applicant to proceed administratively to final plan.
Okay, Mr. Kenny has made a motion for favorable approval with certain stipulations. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second from Mr. Reyes. I'll take a roll call vote. There's so many people on the screen. Hopefully I won't miss any. Mr. Porcelli.
Aye.
Mr. Mattson.
Aye.
Mr. Reyes.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Kenny.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
You forgot Jay.
Mr. Ozenkowski.
Aye. Thank you.
A lot of faces on the screen.
I thank the board.
Okay, thank
you very
you.
much.
Okay, and Mr. Crossman, are you gonna get Mr. Flynn back into the meeting for us, please?
Mr. Flynn. I see Mr. Flynn. You're muted, sir.
Hey, did I do that right?
You did.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so we're gonna jump right into 9.1. This is an ongoing public informational meeting, continuation from July 22nd and August 26th. Master Plan Coventry Road Solar, owners Coventry Realty LLC and Rockwood Realty LLC. Applicant is Revity EPC LLC. Proposed 5.3 megawatt DC solar energy project, AP 85 lots 1, and 5.3 in AP 92 Lot 1, that's zoned RR2, and it's 0 Calvin Town Road is the address. Anybody here from the applicant? Hi, Mr. Murray.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Robert Murray, 21 Garden City Drive in Cranston, representing the applicant and owner of the property. Appreciate your work on two previous evenings in July and August. I just wanted to say at the outset, we pretty much have completed our presentation at this time. I have available to be brought into the meeting a series of every witness that we utilized over the two previous evenings, available to answer any questions from the board. I just want to note for the record that Mr. Ralph Palumbo, the principal of Revity Energy, is on the call. Vice President Lindsay McGovern, our engineer Dave Russo from DePreet Engineering, John Carter, our landscape architect. We have a representative from Hoffman Engineering, whose report you received last month, Mr. Eli Salisbury. Andy Dufour from Main Drilling and Blasting testified last month about his experience and observations about blasting procedures. Nicole Malanafi from Sage Environmental presented a report on the lack of toxic issues with the panels. Scott Rabideau from Natural Resource Services, our wetlands biologist, is available. Ed Pimentel, our land use expert, who has testified that this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I believe that's the rundown of people that I have available for you tonight, should any questions arise. So at this point, I would like to reserve the right perhaps to make a summary statement at the appropriate time if we get that far. But I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely, Mr. Murray. I just want to say, before I go back to public hearing, I've had several emails on this. There was confusion. I stated many times that we would have public hearing and the board would ask their questions after I closed public hearing, which public hearing has not been closed at this time. So there was some confusion. Mr. D'Agostino, would you like to say anything on that, please?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I know there was several emails that the board received that questioned the process that this commission undertakes when reviewing, frankly, any project, and particularly projects of this nature. And I would like to just share for the assembled public, obviously the commission members are aware of this. The chairman made it clear at the outset of this particular matter that he was going to entertain questions as part of the public informational meeting from members of the public. And to that end, it was appropriate for the applicant to present his proposal at the public informational meeting and allow the numerous comments and questions that have come from the public as part of that process. The Open Meetings Act allows for the public to not only to be included in public informational hearings and public hearings, but to watch the when those public hearings are closed, the public has the right under the Open Meetings Act to watch the deliberations of the commission. And I think that perhaps some members of the public who've been paying attention may have cause to question the lack of comments coming from the commission. And that's just because we hadn't gotten to that aspect of the matter. As soon as public comments are closed by vote of the commission, then the commissioners, with assistance from staff, have the opportunity to question the applicant on anything that was part of the applicant's presentation. Obviously, we have the experts that have testified on behalf of the applicant, but the commission members have a significant volume of material, written material, that was provided along with those submissions. So the process here is to allow the public to have their access to the applicant, and then once that public informational process is closed by the commission, then the commission basically has its opportunity to vet the application, discuss particular areas of concern with the applicant, and the public at that point has the right not to provide additional input, but to actually watch the proceedings unfold. So I think that's what you were looking for, Mr. Chairman, in terms of a background on the process. And that process is going to continue this evening. At some point, the commission will vote to close the public part of the presentation, and then the commissioners will have their opportunity essentially to ask questions of the applicant, and hopefully the applicant and the applicant's assembled experts will be able to satisfy the commission's questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. I hope that clarifies a lot of the issues from the public. You know, we've kept this thing open to the public because we take this very seriously, as we do all projects. Staff, do you want to go into public? I just want to say one thing, that there was a lot of redundancy. We understand how the public feels. The board gets it. If you do come on and if you have something new to say, we did hear a lot about blasting, a lot about buffers, a lot about dumping, a lot about panel glare. And we have not asked any of our questions yet. But if anybody else has any more questions to come on, we certainly will hear them. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, if I may, I don't know how the board feels, but I honestly, I think the people in the audience would like to hear the board ask some questions at this point in time. I mean, we've heard 2 nights of testimony. We've heard questions after questions from the public. I mean, I'm just, are you prepared to ask questions, or do you want to continue allowing the public to speak?
I mean, if the board wants, go ahead.
I'm going to leave it up to the board. I'll let you guys think about it.
Go ahead, Mr. D'Agostino, your hand's up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just to jump off of what Director Crossman has indicated, I don't think there's anything wrong with reopening public hearing if that's what the board wants to do. You know, the board does control the public hearing process. I didn't mean to suggest that once the board closed the public hearing and began asking its own questions, that it could not then reopen public hearing, you know, at that time. So just to be clear, the board does have the prerogative to open and close public hearing as it sees fit if it feels that additional questions may be necessary. So I just want to clarify that point.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. Well, I mean, we can actually keep the public hearing open till we finish our questions. Anybody from the board, Mr. Clunian?
We go through this process, and I realize there's a lot of participants in this meeting that are here primarily because this project is in close proximity to their homes. We are following the same process that we follow for every other major development that we have in town. Residential subdivisions, condominiums, planned unit developments, whatever they may be. And I think we should follow the task that we usually follow. If there are participants on tonight that have additional questions or need to clarify something from the last 2 meetings, I think we should just get through those and then give ourselves some time to question the applicant and their experts to see where we're going. And again, not to be redundant, but at the last meeting I explained, and I hope that the residents in the surrounding area realize, there was a solar ordinance that was passed a few years ago. There were 2 nights of council meetings. There was a public hearing, and participation was next to nil. And it was to allow solar farms by special use permit in the RR2, RR3. As a matter of fact, every residential zone in the town of Coventry, including RR5 rural residential, by special use permit. And the applicants, of course, are challenged with meeting certain standards and going to the zoning board and obtaining that permit. But the approval process for master plan going forward lies with us, primarily because that's the way it is. So I can't emphasize enough. We have 60 applicants on tonight, or participants. I don't know if they're all here for the solar farm, but I can assure you there were probably less than 5 when the town council held a public hearing to allow these solar farms in a residential development. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Colonian. So staff, anybody else from the board? It sounds like Mr. Colonian is saying to continue with the public hearing. If I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Colonian, and then close public hearing, and then we ask our questions, and then go on from there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my suggestion. I don't know how the other
Mr.
board.
Chair, I would support that. I think Mr. Colunian's right. I mean, I've been on for a long time, and this would be the first that I can recall that we would have a public hearing, close a public hearing, ask questions, reopen a public hearing. That's definitely not consistent with how we've operated. So I think we should go with status quo of we hold, I mean, this is our 3rd night of a public hearing. Give ample time for the public to voice their concerns, allow us to digest those concerns, and then any outstanding questions that we have, we can then ask.
I happen to agree with that, Mr. Ozenkowski. Under the consistency of this board, we try to stay consistent. So if I could have staff, we have any questions from the public? I'll entertain any questions from the public for Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay, I have one hand raised. It's Rachel Montanaro. I'm gonna bring her in. Rachel, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. If you could just speak a tad louder.
Sure. So my question is, there has been a bond set out for the decommission process of the solar.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. Ma'am, I just need you to state your full name and address for the record, please, if you don't mind.
Sure. My name is Rachel Montanaro, and my address is 24 Watercress Court in Coventry, obviously.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So my question is, there is a process to decommission these solar panels within 20 to 25 years or something within that time range. Is that correct?
Yes. Would you like to answer that, Mr. Murray? You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Ms. Montanaro, as part of the leading up to the building permit process, I believe we will be required to submit documentation to the town as to typically what we do in other communities. We through Deprete Engineering, we prepare a detailed breakdown of what we suggest a decommissioning amount would be appropriate. I expect that the town would then have the town engineer review that and make a recommendation to the town planner. But prior to this project getting underway, there would be in place funds available in the event over the next 25 years the project was either abandoned, decommissioned, or at the end of its term was going to be restored to a natural state, and the panels be removed.
Okay, so my question is, has Revity ever decommissioned a solar farm in the past?
Through the chair, Mr. Chairman, you know, solar facilities like this are relatively new. In other parts of the world and country, they're more popular or exist more. I don't believe any communities in Rhode Island that I've been involved in or that I have knowledge of have stretched out over the 20 or 25-year period. So I'm not personally aware of any that in the interim during that time have been decommissioned. But I suspect that all those, that there is some type of protection to the, not only to the town, but also to the property owner, that there's funds available to remove the panels if necessary.
My question is that if Revity has never decommissioned a solar farm, or if solar farms are so new that not many, if none at all, have been decommissioned, how can Revity properly assess what the decommission cost would be, and say that decommissioning cost is higher than what the bond is set to be? Who is responsible for paying that extra amount of money to remove these panels? Is it the Coventry taxpayers, or would Revity go ahead and supply the additional funds?
Through the chair, first of all, it would not be the taxpayers under any scenario that I can imagine. You know, the bond amount, or we actually pay cash into an escrow account, so it's not a bond. We provide for an inflation factor in the decommissioning amount, so that each year we expect that you know, we've anticipated the inflation costs. Keep in mind that without going into detail on this, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the process that would follow is if this project was abandoned or was going to be discontinued. The first thing, the panels are removed, they're scrapped, you know, properly. There's, you know, for scrap value, there's money anticipated in the collection of that. So there is, you know, at the end of the day, we anticipate ample funds to be available for this purpose. It's for the protection of the town and for the protection of the property owner. And in this instance, you know, Revity's in the business of operating these facilities. It's a family-run business. We're into the second generation. They fully anticipate the next level of Revity vice presidents and succession to Mr. Ralph Palumbo will continue the operation of this, not only this facility, but multiple ones across Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut.
Okay, if the board would allow, I do have a second question.
Go ahead, Mr. Montaro, Ms. Montaro.
Thank you. So my question is, well, I guess there's two parts to it. What is the benefit to the town? And I understand that this would bring in tax revenue to the town. However, the surrounding properties, it's pretty much clear that the property values of the surrounding residences would definitely decrease in appraisal value. So in the end, how does the town benefit from this project? I'm having a difficult time understanding how this would be beneficial to Coventry.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Montaro.
Yeah, Ms. Monaro, I apologize. I don't know if you were available or participated in the prior two evenings when quite a bit of testimony was offered. Let me just summarize it this. First, in specific dollars, at the last hearing, we provided a cost-benefit analysis to the board as to the monies that the town would earn from this project in terms of tax and payments. We balanced that with, if this property were to be developed as a residential subdivision, the town would incur tremendous costs for public services, police, fire, impact on schools. This is not a use that is going to drain or demand any level of services from the town. So we look at it as a positive cash to the town. In a more general sense, you know, renewable energy and less dependence on fossil fuels is a goal that we all should be supporting. So in the end, that's a benefit. But lastly, we've offered testimony from Mr. Sweeney in a report. At the end of the day, when this project is built, it's properly buffered and landscaped. We do not believe it will have any impact on your value of your property along Watercress Court and the other abutting properties. And that's the testimony that we've offered. But the key is working with the town and the board that we can site this, we can buffer it with proper screening. And, you know, at the end of the day, we believe that this will not adversely impact both the residents or your property values. And I certainly respect your right to not agree with me. I'm just telling you that's our position.
My thinking is that the presentation, which I was there for, made an assessment based on the fact that each proposed, if this were to be developed into a housing development, each house, it was estimated that each house would have 2 children. However, I don't have any children. I know several people within the neighborhood of Watercress Court that don't have 2 children. I feel like that is an overestimate and could be potentially considered biased in that regard, in order to inflate the values of taxpayer dollar that would need to be used to educate these supposed children. However, I really do feel that the 2 children per household is a very gross overestimate.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I
Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue answering Ms. Montanaro. I appreciate her well-intended questions here. You know, first of all, the documentation that we provided to the board last month, it was based on the average of 2 children per household at a cost of $13,500 per student in Coventry schools. There will be some houses that will not have any children. Some will have 1, some will have 3, some will have 4. We were estimating 14 residential houses, a total of 28 children in the Coventry school system. You know, I will tell you that I can't promise you that every house will have an average of 2, but we think based on our experience, new construction in a town that's it's a well-respected town, well-run town. We believe that there would be houses on that property would be attractive to potential home buyers and particularly young families that would add burden to the school system and to the public services of the town.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Montanaro, Ms. Montanaro. And you know, that is an assumption. Nobody really knows how many school kids will be in those houses.
Right, that's my point, but.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, are you ready for another participant?
Yes, I am.
All right, at this time, I'm going to bring in Brad Mayer, had his hand up. I'm going to bring him in at this time.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Bradford Mayer, 360 Hope Furnace Road, Hope, Rhode Island, 02831, Mayer. I just wanted to piggyback off of the last speaker in regard to the property value. The 2 studies that Revity chose to present weren't even in the Northeast United States, and they only had a handful of cases. Next week on Tuesday, the University of Rhode Island and Dr. Corey Lang is presenting a study that that shows how housing prices respond to nearby solar construction. That includes over 400,000 property cases. I just wanted to make that, let everyone know about that. And if any commission members are interested, I can pass along the link to Mr. Crossman to get to you if you're interested in looking at the results of those studies that he's not releasing until next Tuesday. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else?
Mr. Chair, at this time, I have no one else raising their hand.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I got 2 now.
Okay,
I'm going to bring in Pat Harbor. One moment, please. Pat, you have to, there you go. Can you hear us, Pat?
I can hear you. Can you
go
guys-
ahead, Mrs. Harbor.
Okay, hi, my name's Pat Harbor. I'm from 526 Camp Westwood Road in Coventry. I've been on the meetings, I've been to site walks, and I appreciate you guys being so thorough with this. I can't say enough. I've been involved in Coventry stuff before, and this is an amazing thing for me to see how you guys are handling this.
Thank you.
So a couple of things, and if this goes, I have a couple of opinions sort of thing, but just before I go on, would they be,
in 10
if
minutes,
this
okay?
is approved, would
Okay.
Revity be able to have some kind of visual simulation of the proposed landscape, like to actually see? I know they said they're going to have the 60-foot buffer, they're going to plant, blah, 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 but I've been told there's such a thing as a visual simulation of the proposed landscape, to have them say on record, this is what it's going to look like, this is how it's going to be covered, let's say.
Mr. Murray, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. Just very briefly, you've heard the testimony of John Carter, our landscape architect.
Yes.
We, in our master plan submission, provided you examples of how we would approach the landscape as it relates to the abutting properties. We committed publicly to do a case-by-case analysis with the individual property owners. I'm not quite familiar with what she's talking about in terms of visual demonstration. If it's something like some type of computer graphic thing, I've done that.
Yeah.
But what we've done is, and I believe we did it in 2010, we've done transects where we've looked at the elevations of the property as it relates to the surrounding homes. We've looked at what the height. These panels are roughly 12 feet high from at its highest point. We've looked at the general topography of our property as it relates to the surrounding property, and we would typically at a little later stage we'd get much more detailed information. If when we receive master plan approval, we would then go about seeking the special use permit, but also working to the extent that neighbors were willing on a case-by-case basis with the neighbors to try and address what screening and what buffering would be most beneficial to them, to the extent that they may somehow see the panel. So.
Okay, well, that's something on record there to go to each individual, depending on how it is. I was at the last meeting and it was hard to see, and maybe the questions will come up once the members ask their questions, but the interconnection plan or the power lines and all that, I kind of remember Mr. Crossman was putting up the maps or how it was going to be laid out, and I'm not quite sure that. I hope we can revisit that at some point just to kind of look at that again and see exactly, because there's nothing that's going to be underground. It's all going to be above ground, I believe, correct?
Mr. Murray?
Through the chair, at the last meeting, David Russo from Dupree Engineering offered a sketch that showed it was a two top and bottom interconnection, map 1 and 2. As the members of the board know, we're required to have access to three-phase electrical service. There is a good portion of Common Town Road that is served with three-phase. There is a portion that it will have to be extended coming out of the site, and we have not yet done the detailed interconnection work with National Grid. Based on our extensive experience in talking to them, we understand where this connection will ultimately go, and we're familiar with the infrastructure that exists out there today. But at some point, And it would certainly not be before we receive master plan approval, because we would have to invest several hundred thousands of dollars in detailed engineering plans with National Grid. But we're confident the representations we made at the last meeting, along with the sketch that Mr. Russo prepared, gives the board a good sense of what the interconnection route will be. But if there are more detailed questions this evening from the board, Mr. Ralph Palumbo is available from Revity, and Dave Russo from Dupree Engineering is available.
Okay, well, like I said, I don't know, I hope that would be brought up again. As Mr. Flynn, as you live on Coventry Road, I know I mean, to have these wires or what we've seen in other places, and it's, wow. So I wouldn't want to be living there, which I don't, but yeah, I would be very concerned with what this is going to look like once it gets done. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. As you all were saying that, yes, the town council did approve this a couple of months ago, whatever, about this solar. Now, unfortunately, as we're all so busy, we don't pay attention, obviously, to town government too much as we're trying to do our own family government and management. So it's unfortunate that only 5 people were concerned, because obviously by what you said, Mr. Flynn, that this was, or whoever said that, Mr. Crossman, that this was approved for the whole town, which is, yeah, it's scary, but things don't come up until it ends up in your backyard, obviously. So I know for me, I'm in Western Coventry. I know there's a lot of property out here, a lot, you know, I guess that's something that I've already looked around, and everybody who buys, which I've already lived on Watercrest, so I know what we went through. Anybody who buys a home really needs to know what property is around them, who owns it, and what's there, because you just don't know, and it's hard to keep track of. So that being said, is there a way, not to reverse it per se, because it's already been voted, but unfortunately not enough of us were really aware. Is there any such thing as revisiting this down the road, that the town council would revisit? I'm just curious.
Ash, you want to take this one?
Sure, I'll take this one. The solar ordinance appears, and Dave D'Agostino, thank you for coming on. The solar ordinance appears as Article 21 in our zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is established by the town council. The town council, at any time, can offer changes. They're in charge of the changes. They can do it at any time. I understand a new council is coming in the fall. You know, if that new council decides they have a different position on solar and they'd like to change the ordinance, that's their purview.
How would a citizen say, or citizens go about doing this down the road, like with the new town council? Like, how
you would have to petition your council person, and you would have to try to drum up support from the council to do an amendment to the zoning ordinance. The only role this planning board would share in, I'm sorry, Mr. D'Agostino, give me a second. The only role the planning board would share in this situation was they would ask us for an advisory opinion. And before you go anywhere, Attorney D'Agostino wants to just comment on this matter.
Yeah, thank you, Director. I just want to caution this kind of conversation, because while certainly the zoning ordinance may be amended at any time by the town council, this particular project has most likely what we would call already vested. So
absolutely.
This particular project has the right.
Understand.
Yeah, has the right to continue under the ordinance as it exists today.
Yes, correct. I understand.
I wanted to explain that, because some people might think, oh well, I'll just petition the council, we'll change it, and Calvin Town Road Solar, that question goes away, and that is not in fact the case.
Correct. Thank you for clarifying that. I know what I was thinking, but I know how things can be misconstrued. So yes, for down the road, definitely I would, yeah. I think other than that, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the questions of the members. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, Mr. Chair, at this time, I'm going to bring in, we'll bring in Pat Del Bracco at this time, and then Pat, you're muted. Can you hear us?
Hi,
There you
sorry,
go.
you guys had already, I guess, answered my question.
Name and address, please.
Oh, Patty Del Bracco, 104 Coventry.
Thank
I
you.
did, most of it has already, I thought I put my hand back down because Pat had asked some of the same things I was gonna say, and I don't want to keep repeating it, but I did notice that on the last, on one of the transcripts, when Mr. Sweeney said that he had, you know, done his research on the values of the property homeowners that live around the solar farms. And he said that he believed that the greatest indicator in this is the fact that it's been testified if you can screen these projects and provide buffers, there really truly is no number of discernible impact on solar array as long as the property is properly screened, as is proposed here. And I know that Mr. Murray says that he's going to come by on an individual basis, you know, to everybody's concerns as to their own buffer for their own property. But obviously it does impact the property values if it is not screened properly. And I guess my question is, who really is going to be checking this to see if, you know, and I'm not saying you're not going to go on your word, but you're going to come and you're going to say, oh, come to my house, just say, and maybe the neighbor next door and the residents that live on Watercress and the ones that really are abutting this, you know. And I guess I still just have a problem with that. Supposedly there's a 40-foot buffer, and we all know that everybody's 40-foot buffer pretty much is going to lose their leaves. So that 40-foot buffer is gone. I guess I'm more concerned on the 20-foot buffer that you guys say that you're going to plan to really screen the entire project so that nobody would really see it. So I guess, is it the board, like, so you start putting it in and just say the buffer's not there. I mean, what recourse would we have if it's not really how you say it's going to be? Is it the board going to come back out? I mean, how do we know that what you're saying you're going to plant here is really going to happen, I guess? Is it something that's in writing? Do we get plans set just for our properties of how it would be screened? Because you know where I live, and it's not only in my backyard, it's the entire side yard all the way back. And I'm sure my other neighbor on the other side the same way, and the people on Watercress. So I know that, again, you keep saying, you know, you're more than welcome. You would come out on an individual basis. How do we know that that's really going to happen?
Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
No. We don't want Mr. Murray. We want you, Flynn.
Wait a minute. Hold on, please. Hold on, please. Mr. Murray is going to answer Patricia Del Bracco. Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, just very quickly, I just want to remind the public and Mr. Bracco, Mr. Arbona, that, you know, this is the beginning of this process. It's not the end. There are many steps to proceed forward here. The last
Flynn,
step,
answer the question. Flynn, answer the question.
Just take them off.
the answer I was trying to say is, at the preliminary plan stage, which is down the road, at that point, we'd have much more detailed landscaping information. The board could review it. Typically, what we experience in other communities is the board looks for some type of maintenance understandings, detailed as the type.
Flynn, answer the question.
Excuse me, Mr. Murray. You know, I'm not going to be sitting here. This board is not going to be sitting here and get abused verbally, we are trying to go through this project, and Mr. Murray is trying to answer it. We've kept public hearing open. This is the third night. We've done our due diligence for all the abutters. I've been over there for 3 hours on my own time with several other board members. If you're gonna act like that, I just don't understand. Just let Mr. Murray answer the question, and then the board members will ask their questions. Thank you.
Just finally, Mr. Chairman, there will be mechanisms in place that I think fall within the jurisdiction of this board to address those concerns. Mr. D'Agostino, Mr. Crossman can detail those at some point, but I want to remind everybody, this is a company that's in Warwick, Rhode Island. We're not dealing with a Colorado company. They're going to be invested in this project and community, and they will stand the test of time in terms of making sure that the landscaping is mature and grows in accordance with the submission that we make to you and the plans that you approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Staff, do we have anybody else that wants to speak?
We do, sir.
Thank you.
I have a phone number. I don't know who this person is. I'm going to bring them in.
Thank you.
Is there anybody there? You're muted. I can't hear you.
Read the last four of the phone number.
Last four of the phone number, 6388. I brought you into the meeting. Would you like to speak? If so, please unmute yourself. Mr. Flynn, would you like me to proceed to the next one?
Next.
Please.
All right, this one just says Pat. I don't know who this is. I'm going to bring this one in. Pat, can you hear us?
I can hear you. This is Pat Hickey. I'm sorry, I didn't have my last name on there.
Name and address, please.
Sure. Pat Hickey, 10 Rivers Edge Drive in Coventry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I originally was not going to raise my hand tonight because I have spoken at the last 2 meetings. I did send an email that I believe was circulated to everyone. But I think the point that I really wanted to make and make it publicly is that I've read the comprehensive plan. It's like 400 pages long. I read the solar ordinance. I've looked at all that stuff. I really do appreciate everybody on this board and how I've heard the comprehensive plan referred to several times tonight, which really is something that I was glad to hear. Not that I didn't think you guys didn't go by that. I'm sure that you do. But the one point that I really wanted to make was in reading the solar ordinance, and I must apologize, I've lived in the town for 40 years and I haven't really been involved in a lot of the town politics. Lesson learned here. I guess I'll be more involved in the future. But it talked about in the solar ordinance that someone could apply for a special use permit and that they could not use more than 15% of the lot. And when I look at the 43 acres that were sold that's owned by Coventry Realty, I look at that and I say that was the residential lot that was sold. Okay, if you're going to take 15% of that and you're going to erect solar panels, we're not talking about a major solar farm. We're probably talking 5-6 acres of solar panels. On this particular application, it looks like Rockwood Realty, who is an abutter, who is in my, the gravel pit, they decided to lease to Revity 50-something acres to make a total of 101 acres. But on this particular plan, they're not really using much of the gravel pit, or it almost looks like on paper they added this additional acreage to beef up the number of panels and the amount of the residential lot that they were looking for on their project. It is just an observation. It's just my comment about it. I would like people to please take a look at that and say, why would we have to take out of a 43-acre lot, 15 acres of it, and put solar panels on it? That doesn't seem like it's consistent with either the comprehensive plan or the solar ordinance. It looks like it's somebody's trying to get something over on somebody or do something, and I don't know. I mean, maybe it's legal, maybe it's not. It just looks like a loophole to me. So I really don't have any questions. It was just basically a comment, a statement that I wanted to make, and I do thank you for your time.
Thank you. And if I just want to jump in, Mr. D'Agostino said that the last meeting, and I believe he said it the one before, that this agreement between Revity and Rockwood is completely legal in his opinion. Mr. D'Agostino, if you want to jump in, I believe that's what you said. So we are aware of the, I believe it's 102 acres.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The question, and again, just to be very precise, the question was, is it legal to have this applicant utilize leased land as part of the footprint for their proposed solar project? And the answer to that is, it is absolutely legal to do that. I've also mentioned, and again, just for the record, I've also mentioned the fact that, you know, perhaps some consideration might be given to merging these lots or requiring the applicant to do that. I know that the applicant probably doesn't want to do that, because if they did, they would have done that already. But I just want to be clear, the leased portion of this property, or leasing a portion of property in order to complete a parcel to locate solar, is perfectly within the law.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino.
Am I still on?
Yes, Pat, go ahead.
Yeah. And so I understand that, but the thing that I see that just doesn't seem right to me here is that the solar panels, if they were shifted a little bit more, and only 5 or 6 acres of those panels were sitting where the residential properties are surrounding it, and it moved into the gravel pit, it would solve all the problems. The neighbors would not be all up in arms over here. I mean, I guess we don't have a legal right. We can't very well tell somebody what to do with their property. I get that. I understand that. But it also, this developer is basically, they're going to do what they want to do. And it will be the neighbors, it will be the community that is going to be up in arms about this. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Staff, anybody else?
I didn't have one, but now I have one more. I'm not sure. I think this is the same person I brought in last time. Let me just check it out. And then, is there anybody there on this 6388? Yeah, no, nobody's here for this one. No, Mr. Flynn, that would be it. I'm going to remove this one again.
Good. Let's go move on here.
Okay, so you don't see anybody else? Before I ask for a motion to close the public hearing, there's nobody in the queue?
There is not. They just raised their hand again. That same person. I'm going to give them one more shot at this, okay?
All right.
At the chairman, is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely, that's what we want to do.
6388, you're muted. If you could unmute your phone. Can you hear us?
Here we go.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
We can now.
Name and address, please.
I apologize. I was having some technical difficulties there with the phone.
No problem. Name and address, please.
Lewis Matthews, 1 Watercress Court, Coventry, Rhode Island.
Go ahead.
So I have more of a statement than a question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews?
Can you repeat your name and address, please?
Lewis F. Matthews, 1 Watercress Court, Coventry, Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Go ahead.
Yeah, so again, I have more of a statement than a question. First of all, I'd like to thank the planning board for all your due diligence and the fact that you guys have continued this meeting, understanding that it's a touchy subject with the residents. I'd like to also state that I feel like the town council, when they drafted this proposal with this ordinance, had the right idea in mind, as Pat Hickey just said, where, they said that major solar installations are allowed to occupy 15% of the property. I don't think, in my opinion, the town council ever thought that if someone was to accrue this 100 acres of land, that they would then intend to put the solar installation in one corner and utilize the loophole of having that amount of land and then shove it into one corner. So I think where there's an issue is with where the setbacks are. And again, this ordinance was written in 2016 prior to any solar installations really being developed in the state of Rhode Island. And how would they know at that time that these setbacks, were going to be crucial? So that being said, if you're looking at 109 acres or 105 acres or whatever the total amount of land is, and you're only allowed to put the solar installation on 15%, again, I don't feel that the intent of the document was that you could take this solar installation and shove it into one corner and buffer it, on residents without utilizing the rest of the land. It seems the town council had the right idea and was going down the right path, but perhaps there might have been some language not perfectly clear. My second thing is, if you read through the town ordinance, it also says that in all efforts, any cleared land shall be used prior to clearing vegetated land. Well, there is clearly plenty of land further to the north of the proposed site that could be utilized on the leased land, which, if they're allowed to use the leased land for the solar installation, for the amount of acreage that they're trying to do, well, then why can't this solar installation be moved further to the north on cleared land that's already existing? That's pretty much my statement. I just really feel like the town council, in their best interest and in the best interest of Coventry, understood that these things should not be allowed to just be parked in somebody's backyard. And I just feel that perhaps there may have been some wording or typos, or maybe instead of 40 feet, maybe they really intended 400 feet and just missed the zero. It's possible. We're all humans. And I appreciate, what you guys are doing and the planning board. But just, again, you guys are residents of Coventry just like we are. Please remember, we're talking about this thing being 40 feet away from our houses. That's really what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else in the queue?
Mr. Flynn, that would be it for this evening.
Okay. So with that being said, make a motion to close public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close public hearing.
Do you want to close the public hearing at this time?
Yes, I do.
Okay, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to close public hearing, and I think I have a motion by Mr. Mattson. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Have a second by Mr. Kenny. I'll do a roll call. Mr. Mattson.
Aye.
Mr. Ozakowski.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Pacelli.
Aye.
Mr. Reyes.
Aye.
Mr. Kenny.
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Clunian? Mr. Clunian, you're unmute, please.
There we go. Takes a minute. Aye.
Okay, Mr. Clunian, and Chairman Flynn also says aye. Okay, at this time, the public hearing is closed. So we will proceed with the board's questions to the applicant. Does anybody need to take a break, or we want to continue with our questions? Are you okay, Heather? Everybody okay? All right. I'll entertain any questions from the board, from Mr. Murray. And I see Mr. Kenny's hand up. Go ahead, Mr. Kenny.
Mr. Murray, thank you for your time and all your people that have testified. Just two quick questions. The buffer, once that 20-foot buffer that Reverdy is going to create, in addition to the natural 40-foot buffer, once that is planted and germinated and in its growing stages, year after year, will Reverdy continue to maintain that buffer to ensure that whatever screening process was put in to cut down the visualization of the solar panels from the neighbors, the abutters, will they continue to maintain it to make sure that it creates that buffer? You're muted, sir.
The short answer is yes, Mr. Kenny.
Okay. And second question that I have right off, there's been a lot of comment about possibly shifting the solar farm to the cleared land versus the vegetated land. And I know it's been, in some of the documents we have, it's been addressed, but could you address that? Why it's going to that particular location, why it can't be shifted, or what the thought process was? Thank you, sir.
Sure. The primary parcel that is included in this application, which is lots 1 and 5.3 on Plat 85, was acquired by Coventry Realty in May, I believe, from the Lacombe family or their entity. And it was always intended that that would be the parcel primarily that would be proposed and utilized with the town through the master plan, through the land development stages and the special use permit. The Rockwood Realty property, Mr. Vinagro is a participant in this project. And as Mr. D'Agostino said, we've entered into a lease agreement to add his property to it, to assemble the 101 acres. This is not uncommon for us in terms of making an assemblage of lots, and that's what we've done here. But it was always intended that what I describe as the Lacombe piece be the primary location for the panels and utilize the Rockwood Realty property as necessary. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I know there will be, further comment from public and some understanding that, or misunderstanding why it can't be moved. I understand that the reason you guys acquired the initial property is that's the property we're going to use, and the addition of Rockwood Realty or Vinagro's property was so you could get the solar farm in its entirety, the 5.3 megawatts. So,
Mr. Flynn, if I might, through the chair, if Mr. Crossman would let Mr. Ralph Palumbo in, he could perhaps share additional information in response to Mr. Kenny's question. Russell, I can identify the phone number if you'd like to help you.
I brought in Ralph. Is he not Ralph?
Yes, yes. Mr. Palumbo, why don't you identify yourself for the record, and if you'd like to supplement my response to Mr. Kenny. Are you off mute?
Yeah, he's not muted. Maybe that's not him.
Muted now.
Yeah. Have you unmuted him, Russell, bringing him in?
He was unmuted. He just muted.
To be honest with you, I'm getting a text. That's a different Ralph.
All right, I'm going to bring that person out. What's his phone number? Last four digits.
Try 6875.
I have no phone number 6875.
Okay. The number I'm giving, just bear with me, I'm giving is 688-6875. Why don't we do this, Mr.
No,
Chairman?
I just had someone log in again as Ralph.
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Try 8111. I apologize.
I have no 8111.
All right. Well, I have multiple Revity people giving me every possible combination to the safe right now. I apologize. Why don't we do this, Mr. Chairman? Why don't we proceed either with another question, Mr. Kenny, and we'll try and resolve the Mr. Palumbo access thing, and rather than delay the other board members.
Are you all set, Mr. Kenny?
Yeah, at this point, Chairman, I don't have any more questions right now. I know I'll have more a little later on, but those are the two that came to mind right away.
Okay, Mr. Murray, if I can just add to Mr. Kenny on the buffer. You said you would do a site distance analysis from the neighbors?
Yes, in response to your, whether it was Miss Hickey or it wasn't, Miss Harbor, I think, question. Typically what John Carter, our landscape architect, does, and I think he's available on the call, sometimes we do it with permission from the property owner to get on their property to get a good measurement in terms of the topography of their property versus the subject site. But we've done it without getting access. It's not 100% certain, but it's a good representation of what, in terms of their view shed, the height of the property, the height of the proposed panel, landscaping that's in between their house, for example, and the solar panels. We identify that, and then that's the basis for identifying how we can supplement with additional landscaping.
Okay, because I noticed when we did the site walk in the neighbors' backyards, the elevation of the neighbors on Watercrest is much higher. So I would think if you put a buffer, the height that you needed to put to block these solar panels, would it be in fact in the way of the sun coming in on your panels? And that was my concern, to do a site distance analysis for that main reason.
Well, let me answer this first. It's the southern exposure that is important. We don't anticipate a shade cast behind those houses on Watercrest. And I want to note, we're talking about 40 feet. We're talking about 20 feet on the site layout plan that the pre-engineering prepared. I believe it's sheet 4 or 5. The distances from residences, in some instances, right behind the panels, 312 feet, 282 feet, 152 feet. So we tried to give a depiction of how far the panels would be. So I don't want anyone to have the impression that 40 feet and then 20 feet and then suddenly a panel emerges. That's not what the plan says. That's not what's envisioned. I've done enough of these projects, respectfully, that we understand the buffer issue. I mean, we're not unmindful of it. We're sympathetic with it. We're willing to try and satisfy as best as humanly possible on the landscape and screening and buffering. And if given the opportunity to do that, I'm convinced that we can. But it's a leap of faith a little bit by the neighbors. I understand that, but we're willing to be held accountable by the town fathers.
Mr. Flynn, if I may, Mr. Palumbo has got his hand raised. Can I bring him in now?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Palumbo, could you unmute, please? There you go, sir.
Thank you, and I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All I wanted to say is, in the previous discussion with the site layout, if you can, Mr. Banu, Charles Banu, you see it's lot number 2, AP 84. He has an easement to travel in from Coventry Road across to his property. So that prevents us from moving in that direction from a solar system standpoint. And then after that, there is wetlands and a landfill for the most part that is obviously we can't build a solar system on. And that was all I wanted to add.
Okay, so to clarify that, you can't move the solar more northern because of the easement?
There's an easement, Mr. Bono. You can see the road going across to Mr. Bono's property. Mr. Flynn, can you see that?
Yep.
Mr. Flynn, can you hear me?
Yes.
This piece right here, this is Mr. Bono's piece where I'm moving the cursor.
Yes.
And this road right here, I believe, per Mr. Palumbo, is the easement that Mr. Bono has been granted to allow him access to this parcel. Otherwise, it would be a landlocked parcel with no physical access.
Okay, that answers my question, but the leased property, my interpretation is it's for this solar array, and it's also for an easement to that property. So that clarifies that anyway. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Palumbo.
Anybody else on the board have any questions?
Yeah, I'll go.
Go ahead, Mr. Reyes.
I got a few things, but mostly questions. This is a residential area, and we're putting a business in a residential area, my opinion, because you're collecting energy and selling it to National Grid. To me, that's a business, first off. Second off, so with that being said, second off, then you're going to have a special, let me get this article up here. On Article XX1 special regulations, it clearly states solar panel installs shall be located so as to take advantage of existing clear land. Clearing a forest or woodland should be avoided to the greatest extent possible. So for me, we're not doing that. It's a business in a residential area, and we're breaking our own rules from Coventry. Can Mr. Murray explain that to me?
Through the chair?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I understand your question, Mr. Reyes. First, a minor distinction in the Coventry Schedule of Uses, your zoning code. There are various use categories, as you know. There are business categories, there's manufacturing categories. This type of use is identified under the category transportation, communication utilities. And those are uses which I think are self-explanatory. I don't consider it a business per se, and you're certainly entitled to your opinion. The Coventry Town Council made a determination that in this zone, major solar installations would be allowed by special use permit. we can look 4 years, 3 years down the road and say maybe they should not have done that, but they did. As far as meeting the letter of the ordinance, it doesn't, respectfully, I don't think it speaks in absolutes. And we believe the project as presented complies with Article 255, Article 21 regarding special regulations for the solar power generators.
Yeah, I get that. But his absolutes, we haven't had really absolutes. It's not absolute. It's a business. It's not absolute. They bought leased land to get it fit into that. And then there's an open land right there, knocking down a forest when you have open land right next door. To me, it doesn't seem correctly. One other thing is that I didn't get to go to a site walk. And the first meeting, I have been busy and I apologize for that, but I went out and checked out some solar areas. There's some beautiful solar areas, nice fill, 116, Nooseneck Hill Road, but it's in business areas. I went to the one in Cranston. I didn't care for that because you look around at the houses, some of the day, the sun's shining on these solar panels as bright, and people have their shades down and they can't even enjoy the outside at 80, 90 degrees. I don't know, putting in a residential area, breaking 3 rules, I think we are, our own rules. And that's one of the things I wanted to say. A few more, but right now, I'll pass it on to the rest of my board.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Anybody else from the board have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Mattson.
My question is pretty much in the line where some of the first questions were. If you did not have that lease that takes in the additional 100 acres or so, would it be feasible to have this solar farm go into place at a much reduced rate of 15% of that original Lacombe property? This is all hypothetical.
Sure. Well, as proposed here, this is a 5.3 megawatt project. The size of the solar array that's on your plans is what's necessary to generate that level of electricity. And the layout as proposed, to answer your question, if we only utilized what I'm calling the Lacombe piece, it would result in a smaller solar array. To answer your question, but that's not what we started. We started with the premise that we were proposing a 5.3 megawatt. We need to get the 15%. We need the joint venture with Rockwood Realty.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mattson. Anybody else from the board?
Mr. Chair, oops, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Ozenkowski.
I'm going to chime in now. I have another question later, but I'm going to chime in before we get too far away from the buffers. So I heard all the discussion related to the buffer, understand the idea of the site distance analysis for each abutter, and I also, reviewing the plan, it appears that the limit of disturbance in most areas is about 100 feet. I think my question is, it didn't get resolved. I think it came from one of the current abutters during the public hearing, but it's related to recourse by the board. So the applicant meets with the abutters, they come to some agreement or non-agreement. In my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, we really have no recourse. I mean, I get that in good faith, Mr. Murray is saying that they're going to meet with the abutters to try to develop a plan that will work to help buffer the impacts, the visual impacts, but I'm not sure that we or an abutter would have any recourse if they do not come to a resolution. Can someone clarify that for me?
Mr. D'Agostino, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mr. Ozenkowski is correct in identifying this as a potential issue of concern. Really, there is no recourse unless certain conditions of approval were attached to your decision. But you do have to rely at least somewhat on the representations of the applicant during a process. I know that may not satisfy everyone in this particular situation. It may not satisfy the commission members. It may not satisfy the public. But I think Mr. Ozenkowski has pointed out a point, and that is that there is no recourse unless there were conditions set by the board that the applicant failed to comply with. And frankly, this is in front of the board at master plan. There are at least 2 more stages of development review. And if, for example, and I offer this as an example only, if certain conditions were to attach to a master plan approval that were not satisfied, I think that that would be the only way to ensure compliance. The applicant would not necessarily move forward unless those conditions were satisfied. But you do have to rely on the applicant in certain representations made.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would just state for me, and I'm not preparing to indicate anything at this point, but I tend to like to see everything on black and white, and if it's not on the plan, then I just assume they don't have to do it. I think if we were to move forward, depending on what happens with this, that we would want to see a detailed landscape plan at that kind of a butter level, whatever scale we need to see. Just a suggestion, because I'd hate to kind of just have this kind of verbal agreement and have landowners dissatisfied, but also not really certain what they're going to be getting.
Understood, Mr. Ozenkowski. I agree. Mr. Clooney, and I see a hand up.
Yes, thank you. Kind of a follow-up to that, but I might need to lean on the director for a couple of clarifications. This is master plan approval. It would be at the preliminary plan approval that we would see more detailed landscape plans, and then we could attach stipulations to any approval. I think I'm correct in that.
I believe so.
You're right. Yeah.
Then secondly, I'm sorry, there's a printer going off in here. Secondly, do we also have to make a recommendation to the zoning board for the special use permit? Is that something that we're going to see forthcoming? Or
Yes, but they have not asked for that yet.
correct?
There's been no request for that at this time, so it is not happening this evening.
Correct. I realize that. But my point being that the zoning board, through the special use permit process, also has the ability to attach stipulations to the special use permit that would be enforceable by the town zoning official. Is that correct?
That is most definitely correct.
Okay. So there we have 2 mechanisms for compliance. And is there going to be a bond, not just for decommissioning, a bond posted to make sure that this project is completed in accordance with all the plans, similar to a subdivision?
That's a good question. Mr. D'Agostino, do they have to provide us with a performance bond? I believe they do.
I believe that's part of the
checklist items.
Zoning requirement.
Mr. Murray, did you want to comment on that?
You got a little ahead of me on that bond question.
I agree. Me also.
Yeah, I mean, on your checklist, item 111 does talk about performance guarantees, an initial amount set by the planning commission. I can tell you that my experience is that the ones I've been involved in, that has not been a condition of approval. That's not to say it's not within your authority. I'll defer to Mr. D'Agostino on that. I just want to bring to the board's attention, and I know it may be a while since you've looked at it, in the planning director's recommendation of approval, there are a series of conditions, but there's a large one on page 12 of the July 22nd report that talks extensively about landscaping, the requirements of guaranteeing one season of planting, guarantee fully effective visual screening for the life of the installation. So, you have language right now in his recommendation for approval that I think is a good starting point for the board. Let me say this, Mr. Colonian, we want to be reasonable. We want to be cooperative. You don't have to hit us over the head on these type issues, and we will find a mechanism. If we get to the preliminary, we'll get a mechanism that will pass, Mr. D'Agostino's scrutiny and the director and the planning commission. I'm confident we can do that.
And again, I merely brought this out to somehow satisfy what I perceived as an unchecked box. This item was brought up by several of the abutters. What recourse do we have? What's the planning board going to do? So it looks like through the special use permit process in the zoning board, there's a zoning official that could actually go as far as to take this property owner to court if there's a zoning violation. And then secondly, there's a potential, we'll call it a potential at this point, for the planning board to stipulate some type of a mechanism, a financial mechanism to ensure that the buffer's maintained. If that's safe to say, I just wanted to kind of throw that out. Does that sound right?
Through the chair, everything's subject to the detail, but the concept is one that I think, we can work with. I don't see
Thank
that.
you.
Mr. D'Agostino, I see your hand up.
Yes, just to confirm, I was able to double check the solar ordinance, and the only financial requirement is a decommissioning bond. So it's really to close out the project. It's not to provide financial security during the development of the project. But as to all the other comments made about conditions that could be attached, I would agree with all of those.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. Any other comments from any board members?
Hey, Mr. Chair, Glenn Anderson.
Yes, go ahead, Glenn.
Actually, this is for you. I believe you told me you wrote down, say, a lot of questions that were asked by the residents. I don't know if any are still just unanswered and you're ready, prepared maybe to follow up with them. I think one of them was, and I don't know if we confirm this as a board or if we put this to bed of, an ERT, possibly even an ERT going in there. Do we resolve that that's not needed? And are we happy with what's already been presented before us? These are just things that were asked that I still think are open-ended. I'm pleased to know that we finally found the legality of the percentage of the land in the lease, and that's all good. My other question, I got a question. Just if these, the over/under with the power cables, the three-phase, that is going to require, additional poles. Mr. Murray, is that going to be like much higher poles? That was a question. Are they going to be, I don't know how intrusive they'll be. And are they going to run, I believe we said they're going to run north, right? Down, up Calvin Town?
I believe the documentation that we provided at the last meeting prepared by DePritt Engineering showed that area where there is no three-phase service. But I believe we said at the last meeting, typically the existing pole network is upgraded. The new poles are slightly higher. to accommodate the three-phase service. But I apologize. I'm not an expert on what the existing infrastructure is with the existing three-phase service, but I think we should proceed on the assumption that there will be replacement poles, and they will be higher than the existing poles. I will say this, and everything is, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and I'm not calling this beauty, but the in other projects where replacement poles have been established, once they're in, you're driving down the streetscape. Respectfully, I don't think you really notice that, this pole is now, 8 feet taller than the pole that used to be there. That's just my observation. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
Right. Again, unless it's in front of your house, whether it be a quarter mile or half a mile down the road, it's just something you haven't been looking at that maybe you are now. So was there ever an option to dig and run this underground the whole way to where you got to go? The reason I ask, excuse me, I don't want to cut you off, is that this is what they did for a couple other projects, running down 117 to Indian Trail. Probably several miles they did that, I believe.
Ultimately, the design of the interconnection is a decision of National Grid. I would say that right now, I don't think anyone's contemplating providing underground service for this connection. But that's something that the devil of the detail of that is ultimately decided by National Grid, and we're not there yet.
All right, that's good for now. So, but Mr. Chair, again, I think you wrote some down. I just don't want to leave any of these questions that the residents had unanswered.
And Mr. Anderson, I have a long list, and I'm actually going to piggyback on what you just said. I wrote some notes down on the three-phase connection. I did a little research on that. That's a 45-foot pole. I believe you had said when we did that, the site walk. Also, if the pole needs an easement from the landowner, can you guarantee me you won't put those, I call highway-looking steel poles that are much bigger and really ruin the rural integrity of Coventry Road? Because you will need an easement from the property owner, I believe, on some connections. Is that true, Mr. Murray?
Based on what I note this evening, and I'll invite Mr. Palumbo and anybody else to join in, and I'm happy to try and respond to these things. Ultimately, when it gets to the dialogue with National Grid and the design of the system, they do everything from investigating their records and land title records to determine do they have existing easements for any of their existing poles. There are occasions where sometimes, and this gets into the design of the system, how far apart the poles are, the weight, and I'm not an electrical engineer, but we have experts that do this. That determines whether or not any type of guy wire easements are necessary. Then that becomes a discussion between National Grid, the developer, and an individual property owner, whether or not they'd be willing to grant an easement. To answer your question, right now, we're getting a little ahead of it. I understand the question, but that's, there most likely replacement poles. Sometimes guy wires are required, and that is a process that's undertaken. I've been involved directly with property owners in getting easements. National Grid typically prepares the easements, and we work with them to approach property owners to see if they'd be willing. Sometimes it's easy because, the guy wire comes down at a certain angle and it's 10 feet from the pole, and the new pole needs to be 12 feet. And, it's a discussion with the property owner would they grant an amended easement or an additional easement? But we don't, we have not even engaged in that process yet, but I understand your question.
Right, and just to add to that, I mean, I have a guideline in my property, and as I did research it, there was never an easement with National Grid. And I know there has to be an easement by the property owner if that guide wire, I believe, if I can be corrected if I'm wrong, if not, they will have to use that large steel pole that you see on Hope Road. And also, the other follow-up question I had is, if the construction, I believe you said, is going down to the station on Situate, on the Situate side of Hope Furnace?
Let me just answer the first part of
Yeah,
that.
go ahead. Sorry.
Just, no, because I want to try and give the board a flavor of what happens. In some instances, property owners were approached. I was not involved. I do not represent the developer or the owner of the Hope Road Solar Project, which you see running along Hope Road as you head towards Route 37, and that's my direction. If you're coming from Coventry or West Warwick, that Hope Road Solar Project is not a Revity project, so I was not involved in that. There are some instances where on the Gold Medal Farm project that Revity did do, property owners were approached. They chose not to give National Grid an easement. National Grid then went ahead and installed those laminated poles that you're talking about. We have a new generation of poles, but I understand your premise. In some of those instances, the property owners have now rethought and asked if we go back to the other pole. We're entertaining that, and if they're willing to give National Grid an easement, we'll try and work that out. But there is, it's, just as we talked about the landscaping being a case-by-case basis, trying to work with the neighbors. When it comes to the easements and guy wires, that's a case-by-case basis. And until the system is fully designed and we understand the tension on the wires and how many poles there would be, I can't fully answer that. But the second part of your question, I have now forgotten because I talked so long.
No, I just had thought that you said that it was going to be going down Hope, is going down to the Situate station.
Yeah, let me offer Mr. Palumbo's help on that one because I don't want to give the wrong information. Mr. Palumbo, I think you just unmuted. Could you answer that?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's correct. Right now, National Grid has given us a preliminary design, and it does head in that direction to Situate. There is an area study, an ASO study that's going on right now that we're going to receive the results in early next year, and that will give us the final direction, but most likely it'll stay in the same path going north as we had originally said. Mr. Chairman, also just to build on what Mr. Murray was saying, he's right. If a guy, and you're right also, if a guy wire is required and a homeowner is resistant on signing the easement, that if it's required, then there are other options. And there are poles that are wood laminate poles, not just steel laminate poles that blend in the same color format as the existing poles on the street right now. So they don't have to be that steel look. They can be the wood look also.
Thank you. So just finishing up on that, if we're going into Situate and we're going to affect Hope Furnace Road in Situate, is there any intertown, anything that has to be done with like an intertown commitment or an intertown agreement, since it does affect the property owners in Situate? Because we had a project going back that we had to have an intertown agreement on that. I just was throwing that out there. Just I don't know if you can answer that, Mr. Murray.
Yeah,
I'll defer to Mr. Palumbo on that.
No, it's a good question, Mr. Chairman. But National Grid has right of ways in all towns, and typically doesn't take an inter-town agreement. Certainly, each town is put on notice and to let them know that there will be upgrades to the system. But there is no requirement for two abutting towns to have a collective agreement.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members have any questions for the applicant?
I wanted to follow up.
Go ahead, Mr. Clooney.
So when we did the site walk, and I know it was just speculative at that point, they were gonna run north to Hope Furnace Road. But then at the last meeting, I thought we saw a plan that showed the three-phase going south from the development on Calvintown and tying into a three-phase somewhere down off of Station Street. And the point I wanted to bring up is not so much the, obviously National Grid has poles on both sides of the road, but when you start installing larger, newer poles, should the town ever decide, again, I'm just not sure about the roadway list. This isn't Hope Road, and this isn't, I don't know the road, that other road, Lippett Road, where, they've got some sufficient width. There's quite a corridor up there. I know it's wooded on both sides and it's still residential, but Calvintown Road, once those poles go in, the town is not going to be widening or putting sidewalks in. That's guaranteed, or it would be cost prohibitive. That's the only point I wanted to make. So at what point do we get to know for sure which direction this thing is going and what the magnitude of new pole installations is going to be? Because I would hate to get so far down the road that all of a sudden it's too late to say, gee, we didn't realize that's what National Grid wanted, and now we're stuck with it.
This is Mr. Murray. Let me just take a stab and then I'll defer to Mr. Palumbo.
Yeah.
The what Russell, I believe, put on the screen was that plan I was referring to of the interconnection map. That interconnection map 2, which is at the bottom, that red area is the proposed extension of the three-phase service, and the blue is the existing three-phase service. So you're the expert on the Coventry roads, Mr. Clooney, but I see Station Street, which is pretty much right dead center in the middle of the sketch where the red ends and the blue picks up. That's Station Street, I believe. But
correct.
Right. And
but
now,
so we're not going north to Hope Furnace based on this plan. This is south.
Well, let me.
It is, and I apologize. Where
can you hear Mr. Palumbo?
National Grid has changed of them, and the ASO study is going to be back. That's when we'll know what's.
Mr. Palumbo, I couldn't hear you very well.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. So National Grid has given us a couple of different routes, and we will know with certainty, Mr. Chairman, the first quarter of next year. The whole area is in what's called an ASO study, Affected System Operator Study, and once we have that back, we'll know with certainty which route we're going in. This is one route we could potentially go, and the other route we could go north. It's given us definitive direction on which one we're going to take.
So I think my understanding is you have two options. And I mean, that's concerning to me. I would want to know what option would be suitable. It sounds like there's two options, but it's hard to look at this project with the disruption on the road when we don't know which way this connection is going to go.
Well, that's a fair point, Mr. Chairman, and I will say I'm at National Grid's mercy, but by the time we get to preliminary plan, we will have what we need to be definitive with the town at that point.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mr. Colonian? I think there's two,
Well,
it sounds like
I
there's two
understand
options.
this. I understand there's two alternatives, but again, we have the impacts of this project in terms of the on-site solar panels and the effects on the abutters. And then we also have the impacts to the town as a whole once these poles go in, whether it's north or south, and our ability or inability to make any improvements to Calvin Town Road once they're in, without compensating the utility company to relocate poles or widen the road in one direction versus the other. And I can tell you with ADA, you'll never get sidewalks. Not that we see those in the foreseeable future, but I just want to keep that in mind. I mean, if there's locations that the board feels or somebody feels, hey, listen, that's a little tight over there. Instead of getting a guy easement, get a pole easement and put the thing 5 feet off the pavement so that if we ever want to make improvements to our road system, we can. I mean, I just think that that's going to warrant an additional level of review by the town engineer.
Mr. Murray?
Yeah, just very quickly to follow up on that point, I just want to note, and you know, Mr. Clooney, I'm sure knows this, just with respect to your ordinance, the proof of utility interconnection approval is required not later than the preliminary plan phase. It's totally a legitimate discussion point now. All I'm just saying is that the burden would be on us if we get to that preliminary plan stage to have some proof to satisfy the town exactly that what we represent is what National Grid has approved. So I just wanted to note that for the record.
Right, and I just wanted to note for the record that it may be at the preliminary stage approval that we may want to ask for some additional concessions, at least along the roadway, to make it happen so there's no adverse impacts, notwithstanding any approval or, you know, that may be given at this stage.
Is that it, Rick?
Yes, thank you.
Any other board members have any questions on this project? Okay, let me just look at my notes.
Mr. Chair, I do actually, or I have maybe a question or two.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Ozenkowski.
So I'd say I spoke a little while ago related to the buffers, but I wanted to just kind of back up and just state that I appreciate and value all the experts that have spoken on behalf of the project and recognize how, this process is. I recognize that much of what has been discussed is expert opinion, and which is not always consistent, in my opinion, with facts over time. And I do have differences of opinions on a few points. And I also appreciate, a lot of the articulate comments from the public. That said, there's a couple items I didn't, that haven't been raised by the members yet, I don't think. One of which is that there were concerns with impacts of large solar developments on abutting property values. I realize that the opinion testimony that was given discounted the adverse economic impacts to the abutters, but I'd like to know from Mr. Murray or anyone from his staff or the applicant, has there been any local Southern New England-based data that demonstrate the economic impact of a development such as this on single-family homes?
Through the chair, the information that Mr. Sweeney provided, there's not an encyclopedia of reports available on this type of issue. I know one of the abutters talked about the presentation at URI, and while we were talking, I did look up that that is a assistant professor at URI who's going to make some observations next week, and we're obviously going to be interested to see what that is. But to answer Mr. Ostenkowski's question, I have not seen any reports that were generated either in New England or the Northeast region that if there were, we would have certainly shared them with the board.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was interested in the URI presentation comments. Unfortunately, sounds like we don't have that and won't have that before we need to make a motion tonight. The other comment I guess I make and potentially have a question is I do believe the development will have impacts to the existing wildlife and represent, potential take in at the minimum dispersal of wildlife. That said, I also believe that housing developments typically are more detrimental due to the higher intensity of use. In relation to fencing and fencing of this magnitude, it's my opinion that this will serve as a barrier, impeding flow in the use of the land by wildlife species, diverting species around and into neighboring areas, possibly increasing road mortality. You may see increased roadkill deer in that area. Does the fence have to be placed encompassing the facility? And if so, is there any way to remedy these sort of concerns?
Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
Through the chair, I think Mr. Ostenkowski was present when Scott Rabideau presented his report as part of the record. I know he knows Scott. My experience, yes, we do provide a security fencing around the facility for security purposes, obviously. There is, in our reviews with the Department of Environmental Management, they typically require or mandate some spacing at the bottom of the fence for wildlife and critters, etc. That is not to say that a deer would be able to get under the fence. But what my recollection of Mr. Rabideau's testimony is that, we're a small port. There is plenty available wildlife habitat surrounding this that, we're not going to have a dramatic effect on that. That's a subjective opinion. I respect Mr. Ostenkowski's opinion on that. But, the answer to the immediate question, yes, the fencing is provided for security purposes. And we try and we work with DEM to establish at a proper height at the bottom to be sensitive to the wildlife.
Is that a state or a town mandated requirement, the fencing? I mean, I do recognize that every solar field I go by has fencing, but I just assume it's the applicant's interest to keep the area fenced for security.
Yeah, this is Ralph Palumbo, Mr. Ostenkowski. It's a requirement of the National Electric Code, and you're right. We also do it for safety and protection on top of it, but predominantly the National Electric Code is driven by safety.
All right. I do recognize too that when Mr. Rabideau was speaking, or there was someone else, they did mention that the fence was going to be offset off the ground. It at least allow, small mammals and reptiles to move freely through the area. Okay.
Can I just follow up one more point, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, under your ordinance regarding security, your ordinance requires a fence shall surround the perimeter of a major or medium ground-mounted solar installation of no less than 7 and no more than 10 feet in height. So that's one of the source documents that we'd have to rely on in terms of the fencing also. Thank you.
If I can make one comment, Mr. Murray, I know that we need renewable energy, But, you know, unfortunately, where this project sits in a residential area, most of the negative affected abutters are on the southern side, which that's exactly where you have to point the panels. You know, the glare to me is a factor. It's hard to stop the glare, the way the panels are designed. I went over to the one on Hope Road. They're facing away from the street, but if you look at it from the other side, I believe Mr. Ray's made this comment, you know, there's a lot of glare, and, you know, you can't block the sun or the solar project's not going to work correctly. So I just think there's a lot of negative impact on the residents that are on whatever way this interconnection goes. There's going to be a lot of negative impact on the streets. They're very narrow. I believe that some of them will have to be shut down. That's just my opinion at this state, but I'll entertain any more thoughts from the board members.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Mattson.
This is a 5.3 megawatt. Do you know how much percentage-wise that will be introducing more green energy into the state, because the state is wanting to move towards that sector?
So,
Mr. Murray?
I'll defer to Mr. Palumbo or somebody at Revity on that.
yeah. So right now, the governor's goal is 1,000 megawatts. You know, so 10% would be 100, and 1% would be 10. So this is a 0.5% of the overall goal.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Mattson?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Palumbo.
You're welcome.
So the follow-up is how much of the 1,000 has Rhode Island already attained?
I'm going to estimate. I read reports and I read too many, so they just get a little bit clouded. But between solar and wind right now, in the net metering program and the renewable energy growth program, I think we're at approximately 300, 350 megs.
A third of the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one comment on the glare, and I'm not refuting it, but solar panels absorb light. Glare is it's not like it's bouncing off tin plates. You know, when panels are manufactured and designed to absorb the sunlight, that's how they create electricity. Glare could come from exposing the racking system improperly, and you know, it's how you place the panels, whether you place them in landscape or vertical, and it has a lot to do with the screening. And I think that was your point, Mr. Chairman. And I think on the southern side, we've talked about a lot of different concepts with our landscape architect, John Carter, and some of the abutters, where we can use enhanced landscaping and a berm to give significant solid height with plantings on top of it. Some of the concepts we talked about, and as we move forward in the process, and Mr. Murray had alluded to this earlier, you know, those concepts will be nailed down in the landscaping plan.
Thank you, Mr. Palumbo. Yeah. Anybody else from the board?
No, Mr. Chair, Glenn Anderson again.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Just not to pile on, but not only those homes, you know, facing north, I believe, so they are on the south side of the panels, but there's also an elevation there, you know, which is really going to extend the issue even worse. And just to piggyback on Mr. Ozakowski's comments, that the experts have been fantastic. You know, Mr. Palumbo, Mr. Murray, the whole delegation. I mean, I'd like to thank them for everything, all this paraphernalia. It's so informative. The residents, other than that little burst tonight, have been very patient, right? And they've been also very informative. And just a quick synopsis is that, this came to us back in July, I think, the director's report, and even the director indicated that this array would be a difficult fit. It was, what a great report it was. Does it belong, doesn't belong. I think it was page 6 on his report. Actually, I have it here, but, consistency with the comp plan. It was well written. It actually completely clarified the actual indecisiveness that the comp plan can generate with these developments. Of course, the report, referenced the ordinance, and it also the special use permit and all that and such. And the director at the time had asked us as the commission to review the comp plan in certain sections. I know I surely did, and I went a little deeper. But going back to the paraphernalia and the material that the delegation put forth, I still have it in front of me. What a great learning tool. A lot of knowledge in here. Very informative, very insightful. And I go to I think it was Mr. I want to say it right, Mr. Pimentel. What did he put forth? Just the analysis, I think, the overall analysis. I think I read that 3 times, right? If he's even on. I was very impressed. I read it 3 times. Very colorful. He's kind of like me. Right or whether we're right or wrong, we believe it. He had an inclination in the ordinance that his inclination was the ordinance basically tells me as a member that it belongs in RR2. And what was interesting on the spin on it, I never really viewed an ordinance in this light. I never really viewed his. I think it was his comments as, and it's definitely in his analysis that it is supposed to be vetted, right? And it's, the ordinance supposed to go make sense that it would go or would or should consider to go with the comp plan when written, But did they? Was everything taken into consideration? I don't know. I think we have our doubts. The solar ordinance we know was amended a couple of years ago. It needed to be. It's going to be amended again, right? We know this. The ordinance, an ordinance is just it's a living entity, right? You got to improve on it. If there's any flaws, they got to be resolved. They got to be improved on. So the decommissioning was looked at, for the town and the residents in its best interest. The area percentage was changed for the town and the residents' best interest. So they did improve on this ordinance. It's just a growing entity that's going to forever be improved on. I have a personal feeling that the buffer, I don't know when, will probably be now changed, for the town and the best interest of the residents. And there might even be a stipulation on elevation of a butter's actual residence, made in the best interest. So, I just wonder if the authors even considered that landowners, could or would combine via lease or whatever to do so. Either way, the ordinance is what it says. And the developer we've proven is well within the ordinance guidelines, and he can go forward with a special use permit. Of course, if it's deemed to fit with the comp plan. And I'm waiting on you, Mr. Chair, as far as did you have any more questions that you said you wrote down? I don't want to step on your toes or anything.
I think I basically covered all my questions and concerns. We've heard a lot of testimony from the public. We've heard excellent expert testimony from the applicant. Like I said, this is our 5th solar array. We've learned a lot through this process. Yeah, I don't have any further questions. If anybody on the board has any further questions.
Mr. Chair, did a couple public hearings ago, a member from the public brought up the question of which setback takes precedent on this property, Vinagras or the solar development. Did we ever get a resolution to that?
I'm not sure on that, Mr. Ozenkowski. I know the setback from the residential side on Watercrest Court is 40 feet with an additional 20 feet. But I'm not sure if that was distinguished as you're asking.
I think I recall from that, I wrote down notes that it would be, if it was Vinagros, then it would be something like 216 feet, which
If I may, Mr. Chair
changes.
and Jay,
Yep.
I think the discussion went that since Vinagros is doing a quarry, it would be 200. But since the part that he leased is involved with the proposed solar array, then the setbacks conform to what it would be for a solar array, which would be the 40 and the 20. Because they're not going to be performing any quarry type operations on that leased parcel. It is in, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. D'Agostino.
I think Mr. D'Agostino wants to jump in, Mr. Kenny.
That's fine.
Yes, no, under the ground mounted solar installation ordinance provision under buffers, a major solar installation in residential zones shall maintain a vegetative buffer of not less than 40 feet. And it goes on to talk about a buffer plan prepared by a registered landscape architect, shall be submitted as part of the project's application. So this is a minimum of 40-foot buffer. And Mr. Kenny did properly recollect that there was a discussion about what the buffer would be if the adjacent land was actually quarry land, which it in fact is not.
Okay.
Hey, Mr. Murray, you have something to say to that?
No, I concur with Mr. D'Agostino. I just want to bring to, I know he knows this, but the ordinance goes on further to talk about when there is when we're abutting a residential district, there's an additional 20 feet. So that's where the 40 and the 20 come into play. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Ozenkowski?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other board members have any questions they would like to ask the applicant? Okay, looks like I'll entertain a motion on this project. If anybody has a motion?
The chair, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Well, first I'd like to just state that I think the applicant has done an excellent job in conveying, in conveying their proposal and portrayed a sense of confidence and sincerity in their intent to create a sound project while still realizing economic gain from the project. I thought the applicant did a really good job presenting and responding to a lot of the comments. The comp plan, to me, is a guidance document and largely more of a blunt tool to aid in directing development of the town. In my opinion, this project, in concert with the intent of the comprehensive plan, is inconsistent with the keeping of the intent within the district. That intent is to maintain the rural characteristic of the town within a residential zone. This project represents an industrial commercial development. That's something that I've consistently stated on these solar projects. I do not believe it is suited for siting within a residential zone. In my opinion, I believe the consequences of this development vastly outweigh any benefits gained to the town or local community. The benefits noted by the applicant, in my opinion, appear to be nominal financial contributions over the long term, and the addition of green energy for the state, which in my opinion are lessened in an area which is vegetated and currently contributing to carbon sequestration. In general, I believe this sort of industrialized use in a neighborhood is not consistent with the surrounding rural residential area. In addition, the project and such development may have deleterious effects on abutting property values. That said, I would like to make a motion not to approve the major land development for the subject 5.3 megawatt solar array located on AP 85 Lot 1 and portion of AP 92 Lot 1 based on the following findings of fact. With regard to consistency with the comprehensive plan, the project is not consistent with the town's comp plan in that this is an industrial commercial development which does not conform to the rural residential characteristic of the district. With regard to significant negative impacts, at this stage, the applicant does not appear to present significant detrimental environmental impacts. With regard to zoning, the project meets requirements of Article 21 of the zoning ordinance and all dimensional zoning requirements. And finally, with regard to traffic impacts, I do not believe there are any major traffic impacts expected. That's my motion.
Hey, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Reyes, you second the motion. Now, I'm gonna do a roll call, but I want to clarify. If you vote yes, you are denying this project because the motion was made to deny the project. So I'm gonna do a roll call. Mr. Clooney, do we have any discussion before I do the roll call? Mute.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring to your attention to ask for discussion. I don't have anything to add, but I just didn't want you to overlook that step. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion before I do a roll call?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I concur with a lot of stuff that Jason has talked about. As it is with many of these green developments, they seem to be situated in places that don't necessarily take into the factor of the neighborhoods in which they're going to be. You know, they'll become the stationary neighbor for 25 years. And of all the people, besides a little bit of the rough speak that we heard tonight, most of the people that I've met or have seen and heard from on this, I just get the feeling that I don't see anybody in favor of this. And maybe there are some people out there that just didn't come forward and voice their opinion, but I would hate to walk amongst my neighbors knowing that I am approving something like this. I believe in solar energy, but I think this is not the right place for it.
Any other comments before I entertain?
Mr. Chair, Glenn Anderson, just going back to the director's report, you know, and we all know this, the comp plan does not directly address solar energy generation. And we do know it's getting revised, and maybe this will just take it all out of our hands for the most part. I really don't think it will, though, but we'll find out. And you know, the ultimate question is, when we say it belongs now, or doesn't, we say it belongs now, and months later, a year later, we have this all shucks moment, right? And Mr. Murray even touched base on that himself. You know, where we'll be, we don't know where we'll be 2 or 3 years down the line, but when the smoke clears, I know we'll be here, right? And our residents will be here. And I'm just echoing the same thoughts, you know, as the other two gentlemen before me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clooney?
Yeah, now I just want to chime in because I heard, I did not interpret the planning director's report to lean us one direction or the other. I think it merely brought out some talking points. And I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we have Mr. D'Agostino.
Yes. I don't have anything to add, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I thought you had your hand up. Sorry.
Nope, thank you.
Okay, I have a motion to deny this project in a second. I'm going to do a roll call. Mr. Mattson.
Aye.
Mr. Ozenkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Reyes.
Aye.
Mr. Kinney.
Nay.
Mr. Poselli.
Aye.
Mr. Lukowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Kalunian.
Nay.
And Mr. Chairman Flynn says aye. The project fails. 7-2. Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I respect the board's decision. Obviously, we're disappointed. On behalf of Revity Energy, I'm not sure this is the last word on this project, but I want to thank the commission for your time, for your interest. I do a lot of this, and this board was tremendously patient with us and put up with technical difficulty and allowed us to present quite a bit of information, both at the first meeting and then trying to address some issues from the neighbors. So while we respectfully disagree with your decision, on behalf of Mr. Palumbo and everybody at Revity, I want to sincerely thank both the commission and Mr. Crossman for your cooperation and assistance. And I mean that sincerely. Thank you.
Mr. Murray, I say the same, and it's been stated. Your whole staff has been very professional. I'd like to thank everybody that commented on this, because we do take every project seriously, and we did do our due diligence, and we did make sure everybody had the opportunity to comment and speak. And I think that's what everybody is looking for on both sides. Thank you so much. Okay, next on the agenda. I'm just gonna ask the board. I know Mr. Pagliarini has been sitting there very patiently, but it's actually 9:40. And I think we probably are going to need a break. I would entertain to the board if they want to maybe push this last public hearing to October 28th. Well, what do I think from the board members? Any comments on that?
I agree.
Me too.
It's going to be lengthy.
Mr. Pagliarini, I'm sorry you've been sitting here all this time, and the participants are many, I'm sure. But I feel in the direction of my board that I'd like to move this last public hearing to October 28th. Have a motion to move this?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Well, can we just hear from Mr. Pagliarini? I mean, he may have something useful that he could present in a very short period of time. We could continue it.
Well, I think we all need a 5 or 10 minute break. So
okay. I don't have a problem taking a break. I figured this meeting was going to go slightly to 10 o'clock or maybe slightly after before we needed to adjourn, because we all do have to work in the morning. But I agree. Mr. Pagliarini and some of his experts have sat on. And it's unfortunate with the Zoom meeting that we can't text somebody when they're almost up. But anyway, I'll let him comment at this point, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. I just wanted to hear from the board members. It is 20 minutes to 10. I mean, we've been sitting here since 6 o'clock. Most of us 6:30. The meeting started. Mr. Pagliarini, if you want to jump in, I have no problem. I think it's a request from the board that you have anything to say on that, Mr. Pagliarini?
It's the board's prerogative. You're within your time frames. There's, do that what you will. Yeah, we've been here for 3+ hours. That's painful. However, I do expect that it will be a lengthy presentation. But you're within your time frame, and if it's October, it's October.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Pagliarini, because you've been sitting there patiently, like probably a lot of participants that wanted to comment. But to start a project of this magnitude, I just feel that we could push this out to October 28th. So I'll entertain a motion to do that.
Mr. Chair, if I may just make one statement, just as long as this is not any mutual extension of total timeframes, you're still within your window. October's fine by us.
I'll refer that to Mr. D'Agostino on that one.
Yeah, you're within the timeframes. It wouldn't be a problem hearing this on October 28th.
All right, thank you. And I appreciate that, Mr. Pagliarini. So I'll entertain a motion to push this out to October 28th.
Motion to push it to October 28th.
I have a motion
second.
by Mr. Mattson.
I second.
I have a second by Ms. Lukowitz. I'll do a roll call on it. Mr. Mattson,
Aye.
Mr. Ozakowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Porcelli,
Aye.
Mr. Reyes,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Clunian,
Aye.
Chairman Flynn also says aye. Thank you again for Mr. Pagliarini for having patience.
Very good.
Okay, I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by Mr. Mattson.
Second it.
Mr. Ray, second it. Just to be consistent, I'll do a roll call. Mr. Mattson,
Aye.
Mr. Ozakowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Porcelli,
Aye.
Mr. Reyes,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Nay.
Ms. Lukowitz.
Aye.
Yeah, we're
Mr.
still
Kenny,
awake.
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Clunian,
Aye.
and Chairman Flynn says aye. This meeting's adjourned.
Have a nice night.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
night, everybody.